The minimal amount.
I understand every word. Oh, we've got 2 minutes on yours.
I was waiting for the come to the
And then I've got
And most all of them except this July, and I rang him up and I said,
Yes. Elected members, staff, members of the gallery, welcome to the council meeting for the 23rd of November. In opening the meeting, I would like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains region, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. And we recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. And also read you the council pledge. We seek wisdom and understanding as we face the duties of our united task, praying for the peace and prosperity of our city. Please be seated. On leave we have nil, and apologies nil. We're at full house tonight. Thank you everyone for being here. Declaration by members of a conflict of interest. Are there any with any item tonight? No. We'll move on to confirmation of minutes. Someone happy to move that the minutes from the ordinary council meeting on the 26th of October be confirmed. Councillor Harris, wish to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bennett, wish to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Right. Any further debate? Concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? This carried unanimously. Thank you. Public question time. Are there any questions from members of the public at this time in the meeting? Yes, sir. If you could please come forward to this chair here, or you can stand.
Stand.
Stand. Just come forward though, so we can. We're televised live to the world here. That's not just to help you understand why we want you to stand there, but just so you know that people are potentially watching. For the purposes of our records, could you state your name and address?
Yeah, I'm Peter Stewart, excuse me, from 15 Flora Terrace, Prospect.
Laura, okay, and you have up to 3 minutes to ask your question.
Okay, won't take me that long, I hope. And my question concerns parking. And in the interests, I hope, of clarity and brevity, I've written that and I'll read it out.
Right.
I live at 15 Flora Terrace and have done so since about 1981. We love the improvements along Prospect Road and understand that increased street parking comes with living in such a vibrant location. However, over about the past 2 years, the nature of parking in the street has changed. Now it's predominantly all-day parking. The street fills around 9 o'clock in the morning and the cars stay until 4 or 5. It means, amongst other concerns, any services that we use, gardening, cleaning, home maintenance, etc., has nowhere to park, and that causes them a lot of problems, and us potentially a lack of service. They don't want to come. Our country relatives and some of our friends tell us they no longer visit because they can't get a park. It's an issue that's affected our lifestyle to some extent. Secondly, on a regular basis, we find our driveway partly obstructed. It makes entry and especially exiting the property difficult and on a claim dangerous.
Yeah, I draw to a question here or something.
Yep, I'm getting there already.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, so my question is in 2 parts. Firstly, does the council have any plans to better manage all-day parking in the streets, including Flora Terrace? And if so, what are those plans? Could Flora Terrace have painted street markings either side of driveways, the same as those in Myrtle Street, to give guidance to drivers when parking so residents can enter and leave their properties safely?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, if you just stand right there, right, we'll get an answer for you, hopefully. CEO?
Yes, Mayor Lachlan, I asked my Manager of Infrastructure and Assets to have a crack at that one, if you can.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, all-day parking, at the moment we manage that as it's brought to our attention. We generally undertake consultation with residents to understand what the local issues are as we look to see what options can be put in place to deal with it. We don't have any plans at the moment to roll out broad parking restrictions. We certainly have within the village heart and the areas either side of it, currently supported resolution of council to undertake a parking study to understand what the issues actually are. And that'll play out over the next few months to understand and see what those outcomes are, which might assist with this type of conversation. In regards to line marking, once again, if that's brought to our attention, we generally undertake consultation on that to ascertain what people think, if they have issues. Murmur Street has certainly been a test case for what I call hockey stick line marking, and there's, from my perspective, no reason that it couldn't be part of any solution we put in place if it's deemed to be warranted. Once again, that is subject to consultation and seeing what the street overall actually thinks and what people direction people want to take.
So in summary, we are doing a parking study. We are doing a citywide traffic and parking study as well. And we're trialling a couple of things. The issue about whether we do consultation on a particular street right now, Director, can you clarify whether, whilst we're trialling these things and doing these studies, whether we would actually do a survey of one street when we're really looking at 8 or 10?
Three is there. I suspect we'd actually be looking and let the residents know that we're waiting for the outcome of the study. It's likely to occur in the next few months, but you leave any consultation that does occur. So although we take it on board, we put it in motion, I suspect we'll wait to the end of that process so we can actually be better informed, residents can be better informed of likely direction or possible outcomes.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that to you.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions from members of the public? That being the case, we'll close that session down. We'll now go to petitions nil, deputations we have one, and we've got, we'll hear from our deputy that will come forward. Mr. Hoppy, again, you can sit or stand. And
Shane.
Thank you. For the purpose of the records, name and address.
Yep, Shane Hoppy, 8 2nd Avenue, Stephen Park.
And you have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Firstly, I just want to thank the Mayor and councillors for listening to myself tonight. Firstly, I'll get to the question at the end, David. I want to reinforce that the Waterford Club is excited to be working with the council on this venture. One thing I probably need to state is that the football club is not so much a football club, it is community. As I was speaking to someone earlier on today, is that maybe the councillors don't realise what we actually do outside football there. Just for the record, we obviously have a disability group. We also have Zumba there. We also have, we have had a couple weddings there. We've had funerals. So we have a lot of community engagement with the community in that area. It is one thing that obviously with having a meeting with Vincent and Chris and Paul just in relation to an MOU, trying to work out what the MOU is, and obviously you've all received the discussion points around that. Probably the thing I want to get to the point, I'd love to take 5 minutes of every particular councillor to go through, because I'm sure you've probably got some questions, but I think I'll probably get shut down in that time anyway.
Got us all here.
But what I'd like to sort of ascertain tonight is obviously the upstairs is probably the area that a lot of people are thinking, how will that fit in to the wider community? So my questions to the councillors, I'd like to know your issues or your points with your concerns around the usability of the upstairs of the new hub.
So that's a question.
That's a question.
Thank you. So at this juncture, what I have to explain is how this process works under the Act of Parliament that I'm obliged to chair us within. The previous respondent was able to ask questions, but only a question. I'll let him make a bit of a statement first, but really it's technically questions. You're a deputy. You can say whatever you like. And you can ask a question within that, but we're bound, we can only ask you questions, which is a bit weird. Fortunately for you, we've got an item on this as the very first item of business.
Yeah.
In that, I'm just foreshadowing, I intend to ask the members for permission to suspend meeting procedures, and we will have a discussion that's not so bound by the rules. That'll be pretty free-flowing. Unfortunately, you can't take part in that discussion. Workshops are different, council meetings are quite strict.
Yeah.
Your chance now is to pitch what you think matters, and then we can ask you questions. And they might sound like a bit of a strangely structured question, as long as people don't take too many liberties. But we can't, it's not a consultative forum like that.
Hence the reason I was trying to get to cut it right down. Obviously, it's quite a wide topic that needs to be discussed over a period of time. Just around the operation model, in principle, we're really keen and excited to move forward, all right, with council, all right, to basically build something that we're all proud of, which is a community hub that's not only for the football, not only for the cricket, all right, but also the wider community. The board have got, don't have an issue with the overall points that was outlined in the discussion points. We're sort of happy to look at sort of moving forward to sort of come up with some governance model that will suit the whole community across the board. We would also like to, in a non-binding MOU, we're pretty keen to obviously run the facility, all right, as a facility, not as a football club. We've already sort of looked at, sort of looking at apps, all right, how we can basically give you feedback, across the board on the usability. But the first thing for me tonight is to clearly make it known that we currently allow the community to use it a fair bit. All right, and moving forward, we want to enhance that even more with this beautiful building that's going to take place across the board.
Okay. Thank you. If you're okay, I'll now ask this question to one councillor.
Yeah, look, part of the issue we've had in City Prospect in the last few years, and obviously we're going through our licensing policy and looking at it for review across the board, and we'll see where that's up to later with the staff. But I'm really glad to hear your words and that you do want that accessibility of the community to be lifted with that, and you do want it to be that community style hub. But a big part of the issues we face in the last few years is we've had community groups.
Question.
What is a preamble?
Yeah, there's an amble. There's a speech.
So part of our issue is basically accessibility for groups like U3A and different groups that can't get facilities. Would you be open to having community groups having more, I guess, regular use when, say, football training session isn't on or a game isn't on, particularly for those type of groups?
Yes, yeah. As outlined.
Yes, you can elaborate on your answer.
It was a wide-ranging question.
So, as sent through documentation to Chris on the usage of the building and the oval, I break up to two parts. So you can clearly see what the usage is. So we're happy to facilitate that time that's not being used.
Thank you. Any other questions from elected members? Yep, Deputy Mayor.
Shane, call you Shane, Mr. Hodvick. What do you think the challenges are of accommodating groups who may want to come in and not only access a space but run their own function without necessarily having to sort of subscribe to the catering model or whatever it might be? And what are your thoughts around how to get around those sorts of challenges? Or is that still sort of future thinking that hasn't been resolved yet?
Oh, it hasn't been resolved because at the end of the day, that's something that we'll discuss through the council on what we both see fit. At the end of the day, listen, we would like to be obviously the head lease, all right, and we'd like to run it. But in saying that, again, it's a community, all right. So we're only going to be as good as our community. But getting back to your question, is that's probably an area on talking on what the people are actually after as well. All right. So if you're wanting to have a function where you're wanting to utilise the kitchen, or if you're wanting to have a person do meals, for example, we would look at it subleasing the kitchen out, all right, instead of like us doing it just for footy season. That means they've got to go get someone, all right, to bring it in. Then you've got compliance issues and so on. So we don't have a problem working with anyone utilising the kitchen. And the other part, if they're not wanting to utilise the kitchen, they want to use the space. That's the way the building needs to be built, particularly upstairs, where it can be petitioned off as well accordingly. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from elected members? Councillor Pearce. And then
Chair, with the you said better to sublease the canteen. At the moment, obviously, your volunteers run the canteen and make money from it. You see it better sort of dividing it, well, I like to say.
Yeah, the subleasing is probably more from during the day. I'm still a big believer that game day, be it for juniors or seniors, that's the hub of the footy club. That's where you get to meet the mums and dads and the parents and the players. So during the morning, as I've always said previously, we would love to embark on making that a little bit of a coffee shop. And to the point that was raised, Robin, in that part was that we would probably look at subleasing out to someone that probably has a lot of these bands that have the pop-up shops where they actually want to make their gear. So we would probably enter into something. So, well, we can sublease it, but what we want to do is to have a little coffee shop there that can be open, from Monday to Fridays, and utilise it from, about whatever time in the morning, from 8 o'clock to whatever time we see the public utilising the park and the playgrounds.
Thank you. Councillor Backer.
Just a couple of questions. I guess the way we're talking about the usage of space are actually design issues. And I think I just want to sort of clarify in two areas. So one, probably through the chair. Shane, do you believe the design as it is at the moment is the final design? Have you been led to believe that? Or are you of the understanding it's a design in concept? Correct concept. Because I think some of the discussions can be resolved in design thing, but I just want to know what your understanding of the current design is.
Yeah, well, it's a concept design that's probably 80%. I mean, there's probably two parts to that. Is the bottom part, all right, needs to be to spec from an AFL and a SACA. All right, so that sort of we need to be governed by that. Upstairs is obviously probably how we as Broadview Football Club see it working, all right, during the footy season, all right, and then obviously the other part in the summer area, as such. And I've always believed there would be two parts to that building upstairs, where you could actually partition off. During the day, when you talk about being a reasonable size, it's not to say that you can't have two groups up there of 5 or 10 people, one being at one part of the area and the other being at the other part. It's not as if they're going to be having a big party unless it's on the weekends, and so on. And that's where you'd be able to split, a part of it up and have the major part of the bigger functions.
And probably just a second one. And again, Shane may or may not be aware that the elected members actually did a tour of a couple of facilities. So one I think was Goodwood and one was the Gonunga Hub. And I don't know if you were on that tour or not. That would be something maybe you could follow up. And certainly I found with a lot of elected members, there was, we looked at Gonunga Hub. One was at grade, which gets around a lot of accessibility issues, and there's a lot of sharing of facilities. Question. I'm just wondering, it sounds like obviously the desire is to have the second floor, but the challenge, I guess, would possibly having activities at ground level. Is there capacity in the thinking of Broadview Football Club to have a look at the design where there's more community space on the lower floor, or is that not considered in your thinking?
Again, it's probably space for how long you sort of go. Across the area. It's not a big area with car parking and so on. Look, again, in answering the question, Gonunga Hub, we've gone around to a lot of sporting clubs that have been built over the last period. They're all two-story. All right. And the way that is a viewing platform, and without being towards the Broadview sort of side of it, it's a beautiful area where you can go upstairs. You can look back over the Adelaide Hills at night time. So to have one that's long, that creates a lot of issues for how many doors you're going to open and lock as well. And no cost can have that problem, but the Goodwood Saints, Lockleys, East Torrens, all those places are all two-story across the board. Downstairs, there'll be a lift, so there'll be a wheelchair access, all that sort of gear, as so by spec. There's going to be a gymnasium that obviously yoga people can utilise as well. So there is an area down there. We've got the coffee area facility. You'll be able to sit under the platform of the building as well. So I think there'll be a bit of engagement for the community to utilise it downstairs. But ultimately upstairs will be a beautiful viewing platform as well. Not so much only for the club, but for the community, for people that want to utilise it accordingly.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Barnett.
Yes, Mr. Hoppy. Do you and your committee that's been looking at this subscribe that this is maybe not it's an opportunity to add value to what you already do, and not necessarily just be status quo?
Yeah, you did it right there. I mean, this building's been there for a long, long time. All right, people today, or families today in particular, are wanting more, not so much for the dollar, but for, for their entertainment. All right, they want an experience, and this building will definitely give them a great experience. And we know you build something, they come. All right, we've got probably over the largest football program, in South Australia. We've had 3 get drafted in the AFL, so we know building something, they will come. We've done our surveys, and that's the big thing that they're wanting is a community that not only can they play the sport, but they can come on a Friday night and have a drink. If I can digress a little bit on that area, probably St. Alison as well, is that the Brighton Football Club, even though it's a concrete jungle, all right, it's supposed to be pillars, Friday night, they never had pretty much anyone go to their club rooms because they were old, they were tapped onto the side. Now, you can't leave on Friday night. The family's there to have meals. And that's the other part, is the meal part of it is the kitchen area. We want to actually call it a name. So be it Tiger Eats, where we can promote it to the community. That's obviously one of my fortes and strengths in that area, is to be able to get that wide community. And we've done a demographic search around Rossi Road, up Main North East Road, back down to Regency Road. There's no eateries that you can go there, bar, go to a pub where it's got focus. All right, so I'm going to make it clear is that's our big focus. We want to make it something that people can come and have a meal. We'd like to be Wednesday nights, Thursday night, Friday, Saturdays and Sundays. All right, that's where we see people will come because you see the beautiful outlook and they feel comfortable because you've got the view, you've got nice facilities. Why would you not come? So if you ask the question, you build it, they will come, and we'll become stronger as a community, not only as a community.
Further questions from the members? Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thanks for coming along and talking to us. I was just putting there when you said you had various things like funerals and stuff like that, and you start to think, you've got to be careful because I may say get to your question quick.
Yep.
While attending funerals, birthdays, wedding people, and Christmas, I've attended nearly every sort of function that's been there. The daytime activity in 2 areas close to there, which now comes my question, is the religious people, the Baptist church and the, I don't know, the other church on Galway, Uniting Church, and that they sort of have coffee things. I've been twice to both of them, and it was a good time.
There's a question here.
Yeah, the question is.
I'm sure you're getting to it just then.
Yes, because the question is, I'm hoping, and are you trying to get onto the committee we've got to look at the final planning that we looked at the other week, that particularly upstairs, there's a lot of waste space now in a new design, that in the hope that the football club, if they become, which I'm going to support, the leading people, that you'll be able to cater for ones that not normally there. So new type of things. New type of community things.
Definitely. I mean, again, I've said it from day one from this venture, I call it. I've invested my time, not so much as a football person, but as a community person. And I've been on the record stating that. So ultimately, it's a football club. We can't lose our identity. I mean, that's definitely, but we understand that you're going to build something. We want it to be utilised because it's only benefit for everyone. Because more people come there, they're going to go, how good's this? Oh, you mean they got football? Oh, look at all the history, proud history. That's when you start building a sense of community in a sporting hub. Because we're probably the first part of that footprint is that, when we get to building these groups to sort of work out exactly what it's going to look like and how it's going to govern that sort of area. Tennis eventually will get, their funding. The bowls are looking just for a bit of a make-up and, and so on. So it will become a mecca of sporting hub within the prospect community. So we're probably always going to be the first off the cap. But at the same token, I think it'd be a great stepping stone that while these other ones being built and the community groups, if they're wanting to utilise it, we don't have an issue with that. And as you said before, Alan, in your own words, was that we had funerals, we've had weddings, we've had Santa Claus, we've had Christmas shows, we've had everything there, and we still do. And that's where I want to make clear to the councillors is that we're already doing that. So it's not something that's new to us. right across the board. So, and I encourage you, I'm happy to give you the telephone numbers of the people that utilise it, because they're in support of what we're trying to achieve as well.
I'll ask a couple of questions. Government's putting in, what, have you finished yours, sir?
No, I'm just saying, make sure they're questions.
Yeah, I'll get to it.
Memo to
You can
me.
tell me if my preamble is the speech or not. The state's putting in 1.5 million. The ratepayers are putting in 2.5 million. Wasn't detectable at the minister's announcement, but anyway. What's the club putting in?
I did thank you for that.
Yeah, you were very noble. What's the club putting in, and would that stretch to the extent of using your current bar and kitchen equipment to fit out those 2 spaces? Because they're quite expensive. I asked the question deliberately, not because I'm kind of tricky into saying where's your $500,000, but we've been briefed that the budget is no longer going to support what that design shows. So we're looking for some sort of cost savings or extra contributions. So,
Yeah, again, that operational model, that discussion points, I have said to Chris, Spencer and Paul, we will be putting some funding in. All right. Again, I'm a big believer, we're going to be part of it. We should be doing something, you know, that's done right in my opinion, and the board and the subcommittee here. Yeah, how much that is, all right, that's something that, you know, we'll have to discuss when that governance model gets closer and closer, you know, to what it looks like, because there's a lot of things that also attach to that as well. Without sort of taking up too much of your time, you know, on that, but yes, we will put some funding in. It's not saying we're going to build the kitchen and that sort of area, but we've already got people that are happy to do the solar, all right, on the roof, all right, as well. Obviously batteries is one thing we'd love, because the lights at night is the big part. We're also looking at, you know, when we're talking about decking out, we've got a few people that have got furniture places from overseas. So we're a long way down that track on going, okay, this is in kind, all right, as well.
Yep.
But we're, as I always say, I don't want a free ride in this life, but I only want spare for the times.
okay, cool, thank you. Good answer. And in terms of the current club's configured, there's a lot of history and footy paraphernalia around.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on how this space would appear to the casual hire, be it a new church group or the matchbook club, who I think used to meet at RSL, or the nitty gritty group who, you know, used to meet down here? What's your view on how that space will appear to the casual hire?
Really good question.
Thank you.
Sort of slow.
You've got a really good answer.
It's a bit like the world I live in, you know, from the golfing perspective, is you got omnivores, and at some stage the poor guy gets down to 2022, there's no more sort of room that you can put your name on. All right, so you know, I'll put the ceiling or on the floor. But you know, that's when you're going to sort of talk about the current technology of screens and so on. So we're acutely aware that we don't want to lose our history, but we're also aware that we're not going to paint it yellow and black and, you know, and so on. That's probably a design area that we want to make sure that our history, in particular, the people that built that club rooms that the council obviously own, as such, you know, we've got to honour that past history, because it is still a sporting facility. Downstairs, I think that's an area where we've spoken about. There's plenty of room for us to be able to look at our memorabilia down the bottom. Upstairs, we are sort of got a good understanding of what we think will look good, but just won't make it football looking area. We want to make it look smart, but also for people to understand that it is a football club in one respect. So
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for thinking about it. Any further questions from the members? There being none, thank you for your deputation. I hope you got the answers you were kind of looking for, but just a different way.
yeah.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to resume your seat in the gallery, and we will move on then to the next item, which is questions without notice. Are there any from elected members? Councillor Rick.
Yeah, just following on from the earlier person who came and asked the question in the public question time. Traffic management study, can I just get an update for the integrated traffic management study? Where's that up to? When's it due for completion? Because I just want that person to have that timeline. Are we talking 6 months, 8 months, a year?
Thank you. See ya.
Director Infrastructure.
Correct.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor. Our initial estimates are somewhere between 18 months and 22 months, depending on the feedback through consultation. That's as per what we put to you as part of that update memo we sent out. And it is dependent on the number of rounds of consultations as part of getting to the next.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillor?
Further question, if we're talking, because I don't think that resident that came tonight, public question, I would be thinking that time frame for that street to actually then be considered. What are we going to do in the interim when residents come with any street issue? Are we going to seriously be telling them that they're going to be waiting to at least 24 months for their street, or 22 months for that to be finished before we actually consider the issues that these people are raising?
See ya.
Yeah, so before I pass off to the director here, it is important to note that's the integrated transport planning strategy for the city of Prospect.
Yeah.
There is a preliminary step the council directors do in terms of the parking study for the Village Heart precinct, which includes this area as I understand it.
Yeah.
Director of Infrastructure, anything to add?
No, you put it on the head. Sorry.
So, Sia, could someone clarify the timing on the precinct study?
About 3 months.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Okay, that's really good. So that person, if I just clarify, if we're going to consider their street tonight, we'll be waiting for the precinct study to be complete, which is 3 months.
So
Again, Director of Infrastructure.
Through the mayor, yes, that is correct. That will inform the local parking situation, having an issue actually.
That's a bit more reassuring.
Okay. So just to clarify, that's the study about this current situation. That's not the solutions and implementation costing of. Is that correct? Okay. So understanding that the members has work to do beyond that 3 month piece.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions without notice? Councillor Group.
Not unsurprisingly on the same topic, I'm just looking back at our minutes from the 2nd of August when we actually had the meeting around the ITP. And the actions at the time was, the next steps was to consider workshop feedback and present a new draft to refine the vision statement, key objectives and each of the 4 pillars, and to consolidate the actions and outcomes for a future council report. Can I just check the timing on those actions? Because I'm hoping that's not the 18 month, the 2 or 3 year time frame.
See ya.
Director of Infrastructure.
Through the mayor. So what we're talking about over the 18 months is the full ITP delivery. So the final outcomes after consultation and consideration. The direction through August, that was dealt with through the update memo that we received outlining what we'll be going to market for and what the key components would be as a result of those discussions that occurred.
Councillor,
happy for this next one to be taken notice. Could some information be provided on, I guess, a bit of a time frame? Apologies if this has been provided between now and 2 years down the track. Some of us may not be in the room when this gets resolved, and of course, some of us weren't in the room when we asked for it. So it'd just be nice to go from this council with nothing more than a bit of an understanding of the time frame. So I'm happy for that to be taken on notice.
my understanding is a memo has come out to us about that. Is that correct, Director? So we'll get that resent.
That would be good.
Yeah. Okay.
Did that include the 2 year time frame?
See ya.
I believe it did, yes, but we can recirculate that. And if any further information, members, is required, please feel free to submit that. We want you to be fully aware of the process we're going through here. It's not a start and finish process. You'll be consulted consistently through it, as will elements of the community who are critical to engage with as part of this process in terms of delivering the final outcome.
Thank you. Anything further?
Just one final one. The deputy earlier, and I didn't catch which number floor he lived at.
Just to that, I asked specifically the manager of government prior to him giving a question that he shouldn't have to disclose his full address, only the street and his name. Is that correct?
That is his choosings. It's a name, suburb, street, suburb.
You don't have to do a street number though, not like a deputation. It was just a point of order because some people are a bit thingy about question time, and there wasn't any clear recommendation on our website if you needed to provide. Yeah.
Previous ones have provided.
I'll take the correct. That people have provided their exact address before in the council address. I'll heed what the manager of governance has just advised me, and I'll follow that up later. But that's been the practice here is the actual address, not an approximate address. Councillor Greek, your third question.
So I don't recall which number the deputy, so the person asking the question was living at. I'm hearing it might be 15. Can I check whether 15 is within the scope of the village hard track study? That feels a little further up the road than I would have thought.
So,
CEO.
I'll have to ask the Director of Infrastructure to cover that, but I took a look at it and it's literally one block back from Prospect Road, so.
Not even. Director.
Through Mr. Mayor. So our study is going to look at two distances from the main street, Prospect Road, 200 metres and 400 metres, to give two different pictures in regard to parking issue and where they exist. So it should cover 15, I believe.
I think both, it would fall within both of those distances. Yeah, I'd say it's about 150 metres. Yeah. So yes, that is in the two walk zones.
So he's lucky.
We'll make
That's my
that
last
judgment and last, and then in good time. Any further questions without notice? All right, there being none, we'll close that section off and go to section 10. And just before I do, Mr. Stewart, if you're here, you've heard a bit more about parking and traffic. Where is he? Is he gone already? Escaped. I was going to say you can escape if you want, but anyway, he already has. Those of you interested in Broadview Oval, I suggest you stay for a bit. First item is 10.1, the Broadview Oval Community and Sports Hub report and operational model, pages, recommendations on page 4 to 5. There's a lot in this, and I seek your approval to suspend meeting procedures until 8:15, should we need it. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. I'll just open the batting to get the discussion going. We have put a lot of pressure on staff to get on with this. The CEO and the director have crystallised that push into bringing to us a number of recommendations to set in train a process. There's a lot of parts to this, and some of these parts start to guide decision-making around design, and you may wish to comment on those, and the staff will appreciate feedback. Ultimately, what we choose to decide today will shape their work on our behalf in the next few months. So it's quite important we get the recommendation right. But for now, I'm happy to take questions on the report and comments in due course. But first, are there any questions? Is anything not clear? Christine.
Yes, I just note the mention of our community reference group, but that's while the project is happening, and I guess if we're following our Pennington model, so once it's built, then there's no community reference group, and it's sort of virtually then handed over possibly to the football club to manage. So the football club might say, well, we do have community people on it, but obviously if they are members, they may have certain, you know, if it's a positive or a negative bias towards what happens. So I think I somehow like fleshed out, I know in some other groups, they're mainly, from my experience, like over 50s groups, but they have all the different components of a centre and different sports groups and the bowling club, et cetera, so maybe do we look at following and continuing on and having some community people on that aren't necessarily members of the football club?
On what?
On well, some sort of sub
like a management committee.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, or yeah, just so that's just you know.
Okay, so it's not just solely football club people on an ongoing basis.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I hadn't thought about that. So, have any thoughts on that?
So through you, Mayor Lachlan, valid point. Probably something you'd consider as a component of the final lease, rather than the community reference group model is really to inform the design to make sure we build the right facility that meets the needs of the primary tenant, being the Broadview Football Club, but also meets the needs of the community. The delivery model at the back end. There's a lot of water to pass under the bridge before we get there, but I absolutely agree. Even the points that have been raised in the report, and I believe Mr. Hockey spoke to this, need obviously for the community usage to be a fundamental component of the delivered asset. There's, I feel, a very good sense of goodwill on the part of the club to engage in a very collegiate manner to make sure that usage is captured. And obviously, we need to have some way of ensuring that the community gets its value out of the asset. Building that into the lease as part of a performance component is something we would be doing. How that looks, though, I can't give you details at this stage. I think it's a little too early, but certainly that will all come back to council in due
Yes,
course.
I mean, this
Can
is
I
just my
just- sorry.
thought bubbles.
It's a good thought. Item 2, recommendation 2, talks about in principle support for the external management operation model where the Broadview Footy Club will manage the use of the facility, which seems to exclude the concept of having some externals in the governance body, but it does say pursuant to a licence agreement to be agreed in the future. Is there anything in that part 2 that if we pass this tonight would preclude consideration of external community members being part of a governance model?
In my view, Mayor Lockie, no.
Okay, that's important to know.
Yeah.
Right, so we can keep discussing that item.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Further questions first. Are there any questions? If not, we'll go to comments. So, Deputy Mayor Matt.
I'm glad because I was going to have to put an inquisitive tone to my comment.
No, I
Make it
do.
look like it's-
Sometimes there's just things that aren't clear. That looks like the report must be fantastic because everyone understands. Thank you. Start.
A couple of things. I know it's an idea that Christine's put forward and, you know, it requires some thought, some teasing out. I personally wouldn't be in favour of that. I think that the community reference group should help guide us at the club as to how it's all going to look. And then once we agree on the governance model and the leases in place, then we should talk to the club about some KPIs potentially around working toward some number of hours per week that externals use it to give them a bit of a focus on the work they need to do to try to fill it up in the hours. I think the football club should get first tips when they need to use it, and that'll be defined in the lease. But some sort of KPIs reporting mechanism, probably more frequently actually than what's suggested here. I think annually might not cut it. But once we go on those KPIs, then we should leave them to the job of managing the facility. I don't think there's a precedent. I don't think that North Adelaide Football Club would take on board the concept of having someone drop into their management committee. The other example is Cane Reserve, and I don't know if we were asked, do we have a community representative on our management committee? I don't know what the purpose would be, to be honest, but you know, it's worth teasing out these thoughts. The other point I want to make before other people jump in is Shane mentioned an app with regards to booking to those kind of things like that. I think we should strongly consider trying to utilise the Space to Code app, because that's really one of the main points behind it, is being able to set up facilities like this. And I think that would also potentially give some good sort of oversight or insights into what's going on from a utilisation point of view. And you know, it's mostly there. You know, the less small work that you have to do, if that makes sense, then the better off you are. Yeah, that's. I would probably like to see the establishment of some KPIs around utilisation, but apart from that, I think the club should be given the opportunity to deliver what they tell us they're going to deliver.
Can I just clarify? I wasn't saying that you had them on a management committee. My thought bubble was that you have some sort of ongoing community reference group. It might only meet once a year or something, or it might be something that's, you know, connected up with our other thought bubble of meeting with sporting groups and other groups. But it's just to make sure that, you know, otherwise you just get people, it's easy to become, even with all the best intentions and that you have all, you know, a great community feel, that you do have a sense of a higher allegiance to your group, to your football club. And that may not necessarily be still meeting needs out in the community. And so, sure, we use it, the KPIs, and I think that's the place to build those things in. So that was my thought bubble.
It's essentially the same issue, isn't it? How do we make sure the community is getting the benefit that we think should?
For
So-
our $2 million odd dollars.
So I think in the recommendations, there's nothing that stops that being negotiated into a lease. If people feel strongly about it, you might want to come up with an extra recommendation, but it might be a bit early. If I was the club, I'd be saying, what's that lease going to look like? Because I want to know before I commit. That's what I'd do as far as the club. And I think we need to put our mind to that in terms of, is it an annual thing? Is there a group that has a look at it every year? Is there, In what way do we think the community is getting value and how is that built into a lease? I think it's essentially the same issue and we need to have some accountability for it.
Well, we have talked about, not in the not too distant past, we have talked about a better engagement between council and community groups.
Yes.
And that would be the kind of forum where we would discuss our expectations and how they're being met and if they're not being met. So I think the council's got a strong role to play. And I know that the team's doing some work on building a better engagement with all supporting groups. And I think this relationship will certainly benefit from that.
Yeah, because this issue is not just for this club, there's other facilities that don't get maxed out. Before I go to the questions, I did ask the CEO and the director before about Space to Co and whether this facility could be listed on it technically. So, Nathan, did you get a clear answer?
The short answer is yes. Anything can be added on. The challenge will be the challenge will be the user experience and how people will go to the website, whether they're at our website and then they see it as an optional space to book, and then they'll get the facility manager from Broadview dealing with their inquiries. Whereas if they go through Eliza Hall, they'll get our booking response. So we just have to make sure that there's a massage approach to ensure that it doesn't feel like two different companies essentially come together. Space to Co as a whole can exist outside of this. I know little single rooms on Space to Co, so perhaps that's an option, and we can talk with all of you around. They may choose to use that separately to us, or we might like to bolt on it. Essentially, the answer is in the software environment, it is possible. It's just whether or not that's practical or the right move in terms of that user experience.
Thank you. I did start with a bit more work on that, so thank you for that. Now, I think Alison had a question and Steve.
Yeah, so I think the discussion's really important. I thank people from the club for being in the room tonight. And it was always our intention, I guess, Councillor Barnett reiterated, we've got 2.5 million reasons why the community needs to be involved in decision making. And I guess from the council point of view, and this is no fault of Broadview, but if we look at the North Adelaide Football Club Pavilion, which was also touted as beautiful views of Adelaide, it's going to be, the hub of the community, and it's full of gym gear. And I've never been to a function there, and so you can see our reticence with such a large amount of, ratepayer money. However, we also aspire to those same outcomes. What I really hope we don't miss is those early conversations. So we're in a COVID world now. The reality is it's going to be with us for the foreseeable future. So having at ground available space that's maybe not fully enclosed, but at least sheltered. It could be a lightweight structure, partially enclosed sort of patio area that people can run yoga classes. Now that's not going to be hugely expensive, but it's really important to get that input from our community. How does Wendy run a yoga classes? What storage does she need? Can she do it as a sort of partly sheltered space and it's ventilated? So I think that's the important conversations that need to happen. And I think just having it in a lease structure is not enough. I think you have to have that embedded through this design process.
So can I ask you, do you think the CRG process will be enough to draw that out?
It depends on the participants. I mean, I think this is the thing. So in many ways, you can hear the tone of the elected members. We're going to bat for those people who don't have a voice. And ultimately, it's we've got a lot of people from becoming the new Australians from different regions, and they might not perceive that this is a community facility available for them. And we'd like to enable them to be able to use the facility. So we have a voice, but finding those really, obviously, probably football clubs are very well organised. So I guess it's kind of, how do you counter that with, those 2.5 million reasons why we need to get the community represented strongly in the design. So look, I'm happy to go with the motion as it stands, but certainly I'll be keen to see what people we're getting on.
This is agree with the use of the word counter. I don't think it's an us or a them, but I understand the core point you're making, which is the same as I think Matt and Christina have made. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to check with the wording of the motion, if I can just clarify, are we off, because I've heard people say the term lease and license, are we offering them a license or a lease here? Because it says license in part 2, not lease.
So through you, Mayor Lachlan, that was a lazy use of the term. I need to own that one. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
It probably will be a lease.
Well, it does need to be.
I
think it's going to be.
So you may want to correct that,
Yeah,
or at
that's
least
fine,
offer the terms interchangeably, but I do believe it will end up being a lease.
Okay, because we use the word, I just wanted to
Yeah.
get clarification because there are big differences between the two. And sorry, my follow-on question is going to be, if it's just going to be, say, a 12-month license, where's the incentive for the club to, I guess, put a lot of their money in if they're not going to be guaranteed to be obviously we're saying, and I'm fully supportive of the club, obviously, being in principle, main sort of manager of the facility and then having the community as part of it. But I do want to, if they're going to be if we're going to be asking them to say chip in, I want to know how long they're going to be in the sport. Are we saying how long they're going to be in the space for, guaranteeing? Because obviously, if you just say it's a 12-month license and then you talk consistency of other clubs in the area as well. And I know a lot of this leads into our lease and licensing discussions, but I think it's pretty important if we're going to be asking them to put some money in.
Could I suggest that rather than us get tangled up in whether it's a lease or a license, because can we look at part 2? Sure, whether we can have recommendations up on the screen. Is that possible? Thanks, Jess. And whether we see that it's got pursuant to a license agreement, if we just took out the word license and said pursuant to an agreement, does that leave it a bit more open for us? Because it might be a management agreement as much as a lease or a license. I just don't know.
Yeah.
Through you, Mayor Lachlan, that would be satisfactory. And I do need to say, Councillor Rick, that my expectation is that this will be a long-term arrangement.
Good. Yeah, but that's
We're not going to ask the club to pitch in a huge amount of capital and to invest a lot of time and blood, sweat and tears into a building that they are going to appoint a full-time facility manager over and give them a 5-year lease. I don't think that that's a reasonable expectation.
Is there a reason why then we can't say a long-term agreement to be thrust out and commit?
Well, I think what part 2 doesn't preclude long-term. I think we just need, there's a bit more water going to the bridge in my view, about a whole pile of matters that we've got to be happy with and the club's got to be happy with. But I would assume, like you see, it's not going to be a 5-minute agreement.
Yeah.
And we, under our regulations and legislation, can offer a 21 plus 21, is my understanding, in terms of years. So it's much longer than normal. And I think North Adelaide Footy Club have a longer lease than normal, from memory. I could be wrong, but I think with that investment they put in, that it's not a 3 plus 3 plus 3. So I think we just keep an open mind on that, depending on what is the nature of the agreement that we formulate. The recommendation says that there will be an agreement, but the principle is in that it's an external model to council, and that the footy club will manage the facility.
Yeah, and I think
terms to be agreed.
To me, I think that makes total sense.
That's the most important part about part 2.
Well, I think it makes total sense. As long as the community, in my view, can have access, and I'm pretty I believe in the genuineness of Shane and the club. They're already doing that, and they're open to further expanding that. Obviously, we'll thrash it out what it looks like through the process, but I believe they've been genuine in that, and I'm comfortable with.
Okay, thank you, Christine.
Or in part 2, it says external management operation will set out in the report, but that's fine for us and our staff because we, are vague with what's in the report and ongoing foreseeable sort of future. So could we perhaps specify more, provide some principal support for the external to Prospect Council or something? To management.
The way I read it, the second line says, and more specifically, so it doesn't leave that as a generic term, it says, and more specifically, the Broadview Oval Community Sports Hub, the thing, the Broadview Football Club will manage it. So I don't think if you don't think it's tight enough, I'm happy to take suggestions. While you think about that, I'll take a couple more questions out. Sorry, Robin was first.
Yeah, just quickly, we went on a tour and looked at the 2 facilities. One was a Goodwood Football Club and Cricket Club, and the other was the Galanga Football Club facility. And this model, I think, fits in best of those 2 we looked at. The Galanga Football Club's lost a lot of its identity. The City of Burnside manage it and run it, and it is really a community centre and kind of a football club second. And I know people that are connected with Galanga aren't all happy with it, but so be it. Whereas with the facility that the only council did for Goodwood and football and cricket. The football club and the cricket club committees run that facility. The offspring of that is the only council, because it's also grants, won't allow them to sublease it to any other body. And the actual football club and cricket club, the night we were there, didn't like that idea, but that's the way it is. But of those two scenarios, this what we put forward here for the Broadview Football Club to manage it, I think it's definitely the right way to go, because it fits in well with the same scenarios as the Football Club. So I think, like David said, there's a lot to get through here, but that to me is the best way to go.
And this nothing in here precludes subleasing, does it? It's mentioned in the report. That's a question, Meryl, and the answer is no. Nothing in the recommendation precludes subleasing. There is an expectation, though. Again, that would be part of the lease agreement in the end.
Yep. So that's still an open topic, but you can clearly hear people saying that we want it to be subleased to casual hires.
So the club has their statements.
Yeah. Well, Alison and then Steve, Alan.
So Alan's first, I think.
Alan, you can go, because you haven't asked a question.
No, well, I know I'm going to support for various reasons that the football club runs a show for us and for us in our building. But the couple of things I looked through, and we look at the football and the football's there, and throw that totally out of our mind. Let's see what we can do with this building with things not football. So at the current moment, you've got the two tennis club, bowling club, pretty much. It's their own little world, and that's not in a nasty way, but you know, they're building basically everything. They have their sort of stuff, but the tennis club, it's not. Dave and I should say Mr. O'Loughlin and I were down there like for their Christmas one, and no doubt on December the 11th, where they are using Father Christmas. That you go down there, they've only got a small area, and if it happens to be rain, boom, it's gone. So I see them as possibly using this for certain sorts of things. But if you go down there on a daily basis or a regular basis, and you go down there at 5:30 or 6 in the morning and you wander around, you've got a heap of people with dogs, and when they finish walking, they head off. And no doubt they all head off in different ways, but some of them I see come down, Matthew and I go down to Chivo's, some of them go to one of those church ones that I was talking about for their coffee. So there's an avenue there of local people. The thing we look at, and I'll take on what Councillor Back has said, because it is important, the $2 million that we're putting into it, and that's ratepayers' money that we're putting into a project, and the bulk of that project's going to be the football club. Now, that might not be happy to the bloke that lives at 9 Balfour Street. That's me. I thought I'm going to say that so I don't pick on anyone else. Oh, that doesn't concern me. But that $2 million, if you spread it out over our community, and I'm not going to ask Shane or anyone to say, but the people that are members of the Broadview Football Club, there's a vast lot of our residents, not 100%, but way up, well up there. So that 2 million fits into that. So it's not maybe Devonport Terrace and that might miss out as far as being members of and that sort of stuff. But the people, particularly around that area, are part of it. So we are investing in the football club, but we are investing something for our residents as well in the football. So that is a real swayer to me to sort of set it up. I won't go back to the funerals and stuff like that, but I've been there for many other reasons than football, and it's catered well in an old dilapidated shed, and it's catered. So if you've got the right people running it, and I'm pretty sure Broadview Football Club will make sure they got the right people running it, sort of stuff. So it'll cater for them. So to me, I'm 100% supporting that the football club looks after it, and I feel comfortable with the monies, 2 million, not 5.7, whatever was another version, to do that. But I also feel comfortable that particularly the top part, but I take on what, again, always try to use people's first name, but like Alison sort of pointed out, there's other areas, and if you go up there again, wandering around, you see a couple of blokes there with gym equipment out the front, and you see the disabled people put it. So somewhere down the bottom, and it maybe doesn't have to be a permanent setup, because we've got to redo this building. It doesn't have to be a permanent setup, but areas that can be fenced off or covered off, particularly for weather, the people that use. I think the quicker we get started with it and move into it, we'll cater for the people in the area. And it does have a better view of the hills than the North Adelaide Football Club does, because it's closer.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a comment generally in support. Another question. Sorry, Tweet.
Just under grant extension, there's mention here that we need to commence the project by February 2022. If it doesn't happen, and how likely would, and we write an application for an extension, how likely would they approve that? And if they don't approve it, where to from there?
So yeah.
So through you, Mayor Lachlan, how likely? I honestly can't say, Councillor. I have no idea, to be honest. I have met with a representative from the Office of Sport, Recreation, Racing, Sport, Recreation, and it was apparent from that meeting that there is a significant risk that we could lose the grant. Members will be aware that I've written back to the office, made it clear that we'll be applying for an extension, and essentially put forward, I believe, the strongest argument I could in support of retaining the grant. But ultimately, that decision will be made following the submission of our extension application, which we expect in the next couple of weeks. But I can't tell you what the risk is. What's the risk to the project? Members, I put it to you that if we don't receive this funding, the project is at significant risk. Significant risk. It would be a matter for the chamber ultimately what we did, but it really undermines the financial case behind the project.
When would we know the outcome of that application for extension?
That's an interesting one. I'll ask my Director of Infrastructure if he can answer that.
Through there, I'd expect that if we're lodging in December, we'd know by February.
I would suggest potentially sooner than that due to other factors around the potential for the desired redirection of the grant funding. I think it could be earlier than that, potentially mid-January, but who knows, really, who knows? Hard to say.
Well, we thought come to February because they want to have a substantial start in January. So, yeah.
We sorry, I've jumped in. Sorry, apologies about that. But we actually written a letter of concern to the State Member of Adelaide and others that this grant risk has also been put at risk. I mean, ultimately, you know, I said that they're going to fund it. We want to see them honour that. Now, I know that we haven't played our best part in that, so we're disappointed with us for that. But you know, have we actually written to our local members to say that the grants, we've been advised that the grants at risk? Is there any way that, you know, what you could do? Now, obviously, we've got to admit fault as well. We haven't done our end of the bargain. But I would suspect that, well, if we haven't, I would reach out to particularly
there's two, the local state member for that area. Also, the member for this area has expressed an interest.
Yeah.
She was at the unveiling of the big check.
Andrew Michaels as well.
She must have got an invitation that was better than mine. And there's also the federal member. Might be interested. So there's three. Yeah. Sorry, did I say something? Then it was what happened?
Let it go.
Let it go.
Even rode past my yeah, I should have worn black and yellow when I was there. I felt largely out of place. No.
Thank you. Well, your invitation was better than mine. So
yeah, one step.
I've got a question.
Colours a bit wrong too, James, but don't panic.
I've got a question about design, and apologies, I wasn't here for the last workshop, I was in the States, so I might be playing a bit of catch up, but it's been mentioned a few times about design. And I'm just trying to work out where the ownership of the design of the facility sits. So if I look at the community reference group, one of their functions is to provide advice to the project control group on design issues. But look at the project control group, that's made up of largely staff and the builder and the architect. How do we resolve the design issues? Because that still for me is a bit unresolved, but it may have been resolved in the workshop I wasn't at, so apologies if it was.
No, that's just CO.
Yeah, no, through you, Mayor Loughlin's excellent question. The PCG Project Control Group is really responsible for delivery of the project, but I suspect that the importance to this chamber of an ownership and a common acceptance of the design is a critical component. So, in other words, the community reference group would be engaged to inform the design process and get us to a point where we feel we've best accommodated the priorities of design coupled with the available budget. So compromises will need to be made, but then that come back to council in some form, either be in a workshop or ultimately it will have to be, I believe, a report for council to accept that design, understand how the community reference group has sort of informed the process and where we've landed, and seek endorsement of that before we proceed to a tender.
And maybe just a follow-up question, do you have a sense of that timeline? But that feels like a long way away.
Yes, so through you, Mayor Loughlin, obviously it will depend largely upon how the consultation process progresses. Ultimately, we would like, I think, as a staff body to land at a point where we feel we've achieved the best possible overall outcome within the project budget before we bring it back to you. In terms of timing, I'm not sure, Director of Infrastructure, whether you can add anything to that.
Okay, we are hoping to come back to council, I suspect, by April with a fairly solid design outcome. The idea of that being to meet delivery timeframes that we're stating to you in regard to actual construction, we'd actually have to be coming to this reasonably solid, otherwise we won't be going to market for construction until we're ready for July, August start date. So the intent would be there's a lot of work happening in January, February, March with that reference group, back and forth with themselves, getting some conversation going and trying to get it to a point of satisfactory outcome for a broader array of people as possible.
Thank you. I think that's great. I'm just reflecting on when we designed this building, and most of us went through that process. It was long, it was drawn out, it was many meetings, and this is different to what we're proposing. But I'm just a bit nervous thinking of something coming to us in April, and if it's not close to March, it's something in December, and we don't have a design. So it's just a reflection, not an instruction, just a reflection that of how we worked in the past around design issues. I think it's a really exciting project. I'm really interested in the outcomes around the leasing conversation with this, how we apply it to other parts of our fabric of community and other leases that we hold. I know there is some work happening around the leases and licensing at the moment, so it'd be nice to see that come together in some way. Because it might be that we come up with a really, really good model here that we can apply to that club or this club or that club in the same way. I'm open to that. I think we should be open to it. I'm just interested to see how that evolves over the coming months. But it's a great project. We just need to get on with it.
Thank you, Alison.
Yeah, I think it does come back to design. When we first went through, we were told that these are the designs to get the fund. These are, we're going to be involved in the design process. The community's going to be involved, and we kind of haven't really done any of that I've seen. In many ways, we need to go away from hard lines on paper to flow charts and how areas work. And I'm really open to the idea of looking at a leased area. So just say, for example, 80% of the building is leased, and there's some shared facilities down a spine or whatever, and there's an area like a day room, just say downstairs with a kitchenette and an area for yoga and outdoor stuff. That is basically the council owner on the space to come. So that takes away some of the obligation for the club. They can still do their partition thing upstairs, but generally the partition, in my opinion, doesn't work. Big space, two groups. It's challenging. So it comes back to design being a long process and who's at the table making those decisions. So I'm disappointed where we are at this point. I thought we'd be further along, and given the short time frame, it's great to. I think we need to still look at getting this money in, but I think we have to temper expectations with what we can deliver with the funding we have.
Yeah. So I'm listening to you thinking, yeah, a room downstairs would be great, but we've been told we don't have enough money to do the design we've got. So a room downstairs is more money. So I don't know how we juggle that. I understand the intent and I support the intent, but that might be tricky just to work out how to fund it. Can I just draw us closer in? 8:15 is approaching. We can always extend if we need to. There's been some comments in support generally. This is not a time for debate per se. We can do that when we come back in formal proceedings. But are there any other questions about the report or any of the recommendations? And I'll draw you to one to just keep that going. And no one suggested changes to the terms of reference, for example, or anything else other than that. Take out that word license. But I just want to draw your attention to the part 3, which says that the future management proposal, including the governance model, consistent with the matters identified in the report and otherwise on terms acceptable to the CEO. So what we're being asked to do in part 3 is to agree to the elements raised within the report and leave it to the discretion of the CEO to navigate his way through that. You might just want to think about whether you're comfortable with that, because there's a lot that needs to be considered. And if you're not comfortable, does that mean everything comes back to council? Because that might not be appropriate either. But more specifically, if you have a look at the items raised on page 6, page 5 and page 6, there's a whole list of bullet points there. They, to me, are the other staff's best summary of their discussions with the footy club about how this thing can be governed. And I think a lot of it makes sense. But for example, on page 6, the third bullet point at the top, says council to refer potential users to Broadview Footy Club's booking system in order to raise awareness of availability. There's been some discussion here tonight about using Space to Co, whether it's integrated or not. We don't know the answer, but that bullet point 3 may tend to limit the staff's negotiations going forward. And is that what we want? And further down, we've got bar to remain locked for non-BFC use, and then the kitchen will be locked. So there's a couple of things in there that I think, oh, that seems to be drawing to a fairly rapid conclusion on a couple of matters. And I didn't want to sort of seek to undo the whole report at this point, because I'm happy that there's been a lot of hard work done to get us here and the staff needs some direction. But I wanted to see whether in part 3 we could put the word generally in front of the word consistent to give you a bit more leeway with negotiating some of these items, or whether we should damp down part 3 and get us a firmer governance model reflecting some of the things we've heard tonight. And before you answer that, in particular, we've heard from Mr. Hodby that he's hoping that we can have a visible space upstairs. But if the kitchen's locked and the bar's locked and there's 2 meetings going on, where do they make a cup of tea? And we're talking about a cruddy old chrome urn and some foam cups and glass jars of coffee on a trestle, or we're talking about this is a brand new facility doing something better than that. And I'll see if you nods that we're going to do something better than that. How do we? Some of these things can be resolved through design, but yes. Firstly, does the word generally give you enough freedom to navigate around the discussion tonight? That's a question for you. I'll come to elect members about your level of comfort in a second.
So, if I may, I'll try and answer both questions at once because I think I can. Firstly, yes, in relation to the word generally, that would assist in giving me at least some flexibility within the constraints of the debate here, members. And to that extent, I'd move to another potential amendment that you may choose to add, which is consistent with the text of the report, but not necessarily critically captured in the wording of the recommendation. That is that we add the word non-binding to the memorandum of understanding. In other words, this MOU will be non-binding. It is essentially an expression of intent in terms of where we go as a starting point for a detailed lease discussion once we progress.
Okay, so that's in that same part 3.
That may serve to give members a little more confidence in terms of the fact that what we're agreeing here is very high level principles that are not going to bind any party, but will help us have a sense of where the design will go in order to answer those questions you posed, Mayor Lachlan, in relation to things like where do you make your coffee and how's that going?
Does that make people feel a bit more comfortable? I mean, it is about our level of comfort going forward.
So to clarify, this is just about progression of the design brief. That's all it is.
Yes, but the brief is, we've always said, heavily related to the operating model. The two have to go hand in hand. You've got to tell an architect, do you need to have a little kitchenette in every meeting room? Do you need another meeting room downstairs or not? you have half a kitchen closed and half open, these are fundamental issues for a designer.
I move the motion that we extend for another 15 minutes because it's half a minute to go.
I'll put that to the legal members. All those in favour of going to 8:30, the suspension meeting procedures. All those against? That's carried and thus suspension is extended. So, sorry, Christina, you were.
Yes, yes, I'm just trying to, so this, I mean, we've got to get a move on. I think we all realise that, all right? We
Yeah.
don't
More
hold things
specifically,
up.
those
So
suggestions.
my thing was about the progression. So part 3 is about progressing the design brief. So that's what the non-binding memorandum of understanding football club is. And it's just outlining key elements and the future manager and governance model. But when does that stop and start after that?
That's a good question. More specifically, nothing here says that council will approve the final design. Nothing says that you've been given delegation, CEO, to approve it either. So do we need that in here somewhere?
Through you, Mayor Lachlan, first I'll answer Councillor Barnett's question. The MOU and the governance model is high-level governance model. It's not a detailed governance model. No one's suggesting it is. This is only to assist in framing the design brief, as Mayor Lachlan's pointed out, to give us some guidance in terms of what specific elements need to form part of the design, because that is important. Secondly, in relation to bringing the design back to council, as I mentioned before, that was certainly my intention, so I'd have no qualms whatsoever in council adding that to the recommendation.
It is covered on page 10 in the time frame. It's outlined at the top of page 10. It says in March to June, endorsed concept designs in brackets, March 2022 council meeting.
Well, I think you need to get
That's
some of
aggressive.
those.
We've landed that. I mean, this is all dependent upon how that consultation process progresses, and you know, we'll do our very best to push it forward as quickly as we can.
Or can we still have some time? But like we mentioned, whatever the appropriate time frame is.
Can you just,
I mean, I just wanted to make sure that as a project management
yes.
thing, that, I mean, it's very important to have those timeframes in. Otherwise, it's just really, you know.
So on this building, you might remember we had a monthly project report as an information report.
Yeah.
So every council meeting you could see how it was going. It's my recollection, Nathan, that's correct, isn't it? Yeah. And given that we're already running late and there's some sensitivity around time, I wonder whether that might be pertinent here. It's a bit more work, but it really is just a summary of the PCG meeting status and the COG meeting status. It's not a report to do much more than keep us informed. Is that something you think would be doable?
Through you, Mayor Lachlan, anything is doable. The question is whether it's, you know, what council wants in the end. The PCG will have agendas and minutes at every meeting. I'm certainly happy to share those with members in some forum. If you want them either tidied up and brought to council in a public-facing way, we could do that, but it will take a little extra time. And remember, our project managers are pretty stretched trying to get this project back on track. But if members want that, of course, we'll do it.
Maybe the PCG units might be the easy way of doing it, so it's just one process.
Yeah.
So through Mayor Lachlan, that's what I did in not a similar project, but another very large project I was running in my last council. I would circulate agendas and minutes to all councillors after that PCG was completed. We could do that as part of our new CEO update weekly news process that I'm about to, spoiler alert, launch hopefully next week or the week after. You'll start seeing a fortnightly weekly news update coming to all members, capturing all memos, things like core events, road closures, that sort of thing. You're going to see that. This could certainly form a portion of that report. Members will mind.
Yeah, because I mean, you, your staff, and the football club will be having those. So I think to include a reporting mechanism to us, because you've got to do it anyway. So we may as well be included.
Yeah, so a part 11 might be that the CEO provides monthly updates in the form of PCG minutes. How do we capture the design coming back to council? Are people happy that it's in the report and therefore the intention's clear, or do you want to have a specific recommendation that it comes to us? Just a bit of bit of ambivalence there, okay.
I've just got a question. It's just on the makeup of the PCG. I'm just trying to find out the reference to who's on it.
Yes.
So can I ask a question through the mayor, just in relation to which directorates or staff are actually on the PCG? Maybe I've.
So through you, Mayor
Well,
Lachlan.
that's meeting procedures are suspended, so we need to go through anybody.
Okay,
Fair
sorry.
enough. Straight to you, Councillor.
Thank you.
So we have finance team, obviously infrastructure team are represented by multiple. The director and the project manager are both represented. We have comms, we have risk, we have planning and finance.
Okay, this is the problem. You haven't mentioned community once. Community is at the heart of this project. It's the heart of our strategic plan, and I haven't seen community represented. So we refer to the director of planning. Where is the community represented? That is my concern.
So yeah,
Mayor ex officio.
the points well made. The community reference group in our mind are there to inform the design. The project control group are there to make sure this building is finished. So in other words, to drive the process through to completion. I'm more than happy though to take some guidance on that. We could certainly have.
So I think well, we have within our directorate, we have people accountable for community relationships, and it's specific within that brief. Why are they not already liaising with groups that potentially could use the facility? So thus, why are we having this reference group if we've already got someone who's accountable for those relationships?
Yeah, so I would observe this. It is important to have those stakeholders together in the same place.
Oh, definitely. I don't
there
disagree.
There are compromises that are going to need to be made as part of the design process. And I really genuinely hope that the community reference group process will enable us to get there on that. I'm not suggesting for a moment though that the point is well made in relation to having community-based expertise on the PCG. That makes sense.
And whether they're staff members who have community experience, and this is the thing. But I had it on the outside. It appears to me like an infrastructure project, and I think that's what we're going to end up with. Whereas I'm very keen to see the community.
Yep. If we draw your attention to page 26, talks about composition of the CRG. In the bullet point list there, the first one is the chair as a staff member. Down the bottom of the page, so you get to page 26, CEO. Yep, there. Down the bottom of the page, members, it says the structure is the chair will be the director of infrastructure and environment. Deputy chair is a project manager who's from the same department. The minute taker is also from the same department. So it's a strong emphasis on it being an infrastructure project. I think that challenge has been put there by certainly Alison, and I would agree with that. There's no one with the word community in their title in there anywhere. And whilst we've got a CRG, is there another rep you would think CEO would have that in their mind all the time as part of their job?
Can I take that on notice? I do believe we've got the right person in the business. I'd just like to engage with my executive team to consider that. It's an excellent point, and I think it's worthwhile considering, and I'll give it careful consideration. See if we can identify the right person. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Justice Christina, you asked a lot and said a lot. I'm just checking if there's anyone else who wants
that's fine.
to say or anything.
Sorry, just a question which similar to what Councillor Barnett spoke about in terms of the non-binding MOU. I presume that will expire when the lease agreement is signed. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that was probably, I think that's what Christina was trying to ask before.
Yeah.
So once we have a lease, the MOU is.
Well, you'd hope that the agreement, you'd hope the agreement would encapsulate
whatever the agreement
all the obligations.
Yes.
Yeah, and be binding.
I just think that tries to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Christine?
I know on the community representative group, we do actually have the mayor and 2 ward councillors appointed by council. So I would assume that they would also, be able to advocate for community things apart from council things.
That's within the CRG, is my understanding. It's not within the project control group.
Oh, right, okay.
So you might think about that too. Is that a way of resolving the community tie across? That the mayor becomes a rep, or there's someone else, ward council, someone gets onto the PCG. I don't know. I think the issue's been raised as quite good issue to talk about. The structure of this might need some thinking about. I know with this building, it's a community facility and a staff office facility, and the representation on the PCG was really reflective of that. I'm looking at Nathan for confirmation.
CRG was certain.
Yeah.
The PCG was project management.
Who was a rep from staff from executive? Yeah, and you have control of most of the activity
Yes.
that was sensitive in the building was under your directorate. Yeah.
But the mayor and I attended those. I mean, I found it as, being, although it's for the whole city, but it was built in our ward. And I found that those meetings were extremely revealing, to say the least.
Yes, but you might recall that was a third meeting structure.
Was it? Oh,
Yes.
God. Oh, all right. So we're going to, all right, don't let's get bogged down. We're losing time already.
Which was overbooked, right? The simpler way is making sure you've got some community-minded officers or elected members in the peak decision-making body under council. So I think we've on a pretty good path here, but I think that might be something to take a notice and 100% on that. But draw you back to item 3. The staff have added some words that have been spoken about in part 3, non-binding and the word generally. It doesn't seem like there's an appetite to clearly say the design is to come back to council. I think it's implicit in what's here and in the report, unless I've read the room incorrectly. Are there any further suggestions for this being improved other than what's been incorporated thus far?
I've seen a lot of all the, it did concern me on first reading, but that's just first reading because I wasn't obviously like a lot of us present with the Broadfield Football Club, but there's talk about things being locked and just being not available and all the rest of it. So I'd like somewhere, I hope that will all be teased out and made a bit clearer. And like there'll be actual definitions about what that means to sublet or sub-license, what a pricing structure would look like, because we made a big effort with this building here. And I know there were some of us elected members who really, went into bat for the pricing structure here to reflect what, the community could basically pay, so that people aren't priced out of a building. So there was some research that was done on that. And to have some understanding, I know that with bar licensing and things like that, that there are things that you can and you can't do. And like if somebody wants to hire the bar there, is that like a part of the pricing structure and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I think part 6 deals with the fee setting. The second bullet point on part 6 talks about BFC working in consultation with council on setting fees and terms.
Yeah.
Ultimately there'll be a lease and license or some sort of agreement where we might want to put in that some process that does that every year, for instance.
Yeah.
But right now, in principle, there needs to be a discussion, at least that's what that bullet point says to me. And I agree with you about licensing. There's a lot more discussion that has to happen around that.
But we had a workshop on that, it might be a few years ago, and we were, by the time we found out about what it meant to have a license compared with a lease, we said we don't want to have anything to do with a license.
So we'll leave that to the good professional staff to sort out those finer details. If there's no further suggestions around different wording or any other reason to delay going back in the formal meeting procedures, I will. And ask somebody if they're happy to move what's on the screen. The only changes are those that are highlighted in yellow. Councillor Ripp, you wish to speak to it?
Assuming you asked them to read them?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, Alan, do you want to move it, Alan? Yeah. Oh.
Rock, scissors.
Yeah, I was
Paper,
gonna-
scissors,
look, I'll move it because I realise then who's going to second it, so it's most likely equal. I'm going to move it for various reasons. One, that area that we've had up there has been a vital part of the community as a whole. And maybe for the whole of Prospect, but also over the other side of the various roads into the other parts of Broadview and other people that live in Port Adelaide, Enfield. Not sure about Walkerville, but could be. But I want to move it because this will hopefully get us moving along. I've got the trust in the CEO. I'm putting the trust in the CEO and others on board that they come up with something that will definitely cater for the whole community. And 80% or 90% of them will be people that are playing football or associated with it. But I'll still call them community rather than football. So it fits into a lot of them. The work I've seen that's happened there, the way it's come, and the greatness that's happened for a lot of our youth. I've seen a lot of old people there that are enjoying themselves, and good luck, and hopefully they do for the last couple of years. But for the youth that are coming along, that's a very important thing. If you look at the Nailsworth School and other ones that are increasing, in fact, the first time they haven't had an increase in childbirth this time, but in the main, there's a lot of young people in there, and particularly not just a lot of young boys, but a lot of young girls as well. And so we've ignored them for a long time as an equal participant in some sports, not so much the lacrosse and those others, but for the football, we've ignored them and they should have been there years ago. Broadview has taken that step. I look at the people that use the areas, I feel sorry if we go down this track for some of them with the loss of some of the trees. It should have been where I wanted in the first place, but it's not the case. And the trees we're going to lose are pretty well foreign trees anyway. The gums hopefully at the back. This, what we're voting on tonight, will set a process up between us and the football club as the main two heading sort of thing to utilise that area totally for the people in our area. So as a community thinking person, I'd like to move it as such that it will be a benefit to the whole community within Prospect and also the outlying areas.
Thank you. Got a second. Councillor.
Yeah, without repeating the words of Councillor Harrison moving, yeah, look, I do have trust in the team, the CEO to obviously drive this thing moving forward. I do want to also see to back up Councillor De Backer's comment. So it's not just an infrastructure project. I want the community staff involved in this as well. I think that makes total sense. So where there's opportunity, if we could look at doing that, that would make sense to me. Also, obviously, this project heads on the grant money coming from the state, so I encourage you to keep that pressure on and see that money through. Obviously, we need to do the right thing in Midfold, but we are not where we should be in this, and I'm disappointed with that. I want to put that on the record. I'm disappointed with that. I want to see this moving along, and I believe this will enable it to move along, so I'm happy to obviously support it. It'd be great to see a community hub in the east and a place where that's accessible and open for all of the community to use. And I believe that the club needs to enable the best facilitation of this. I believe it would make total sense for the club to run it and for them to have a long-term lease license, whatever arrangement you want to come up with them. And I do believe and have full trust in the club that they would seek to do the right thing through it, because they do have community using the space at the moment. In their eyes, it would make sense to open it up further for the community. Obviously, we need to put checks and balances in place as part of the community reference group that is going to happen. And following on from Councillor Barnett's comment, we can look at maybe we have meetings after continue after the build to make sure that has that actually happened and just have an eye over that. But I have faith that the club are genuine in their desire to actually see this open up as a genuine community hub as well. And look, I think we need to get this moving forward. We need to involve the community reference group, and we need to get this moving forward at quite a pace. It's been a bit lackluster up to this point.
Thank you. Any further debate, Deputy Mayor?
I won't repeat what Mover and Secretary have said. That will take a long time. But taking on board the feedback around the community side of things, let's not forget that Broadview are the community. They're not interlopers into this situation who have come in and looking to launch a money-making exercise. They're the ones who have driven that scenario to get to this point where there's demand for a centre like this. They're the ones who've been there for how many years, 60 or 70 years. They've been at the centre of the community for that long. So yeah, let's not forget, let's not petition these guys off from the whole community. They are the community as well. And I agree with Councillor Ripper. It'd be great to see a community hub in the east, and maybe one day we might see a community hub in the west as well. I just sort of the lower west. Lower west. Yeah, something down there, big the balance, wouldn't it? Something in the east, something in the west.
Did you put a full stop on there somewhere?
Finish it.
Okay, carry on.
Full stop.
Any further debate? Just from the chair, I'm delighted to see us get to this stage. We've put a lot of pressure on staff over a lot of time. It's good to see finally something happening. And I acknowledge the efforts of our acting CEO, Alison Hancock, who did a lot of work on the community reference group framework, which I think is pretty well, good work, and it's in here. And on the appointment of Paul Peretti, I think as a project manager, that's clearly made a difference in having the resource there. So thank you to those two people in particular. Thank you too to Mr. Hodby, who's come along, and club members who are here tonight. This is a really important project to us. You can sense our sensitivity around a number of matters, and we will remain sensitive to those matters because we've never spent in the history of this city this amount of money, or anything in real terms, anything like this amount of money in the history of this city on a sporting facility. So this the needs for us to feel it as a community hub are acute for us. So please understand our sensitivity, and I know you want to work with us to make that work, and I fully take on board what our Deputy Mayor has said, is that Broadview is very much part of the community. I get all that. But I don't think that'll temper our sensitivity until we see it overflowing with all sorts of interesting hirers, such as we see from time to time popping up looking for space. And I did speak with the Mayor of Port Adelaide Enfield only yesterday, saying for some advice on this project, saying that this is at the edge of our city. It's almost in a corner. I said I expect that there'll be users from within her city that will like to see this as their community hub as well, and I'd be delighted if that was the case. Given that there's nothing else like it in the vicinity. So the only two remaining items which have left with the CEO is about having community development type staff involved in it somewhere, and I will take that on board. And also the regular reporting cycle back to council. We haven't immersed that in the recommendations or the resolution, but I take on board there'll be some form of regular reporting. This thing needs to move absolutely at speed. There's a high risk that we will not achieve the deadlines, and I think there needs to be a lot more thought put into careful management of how all these different forces and sensitivities are corralled in a way which is respectful of what those intentions are and gets us to a design and a cost plan that can work in the most expeditious way without compromising quality. So that's a very tough gig, and if Paul gets it right, we might give him a sainthood or a knighthood or something, but it's a tough gig. And CEO, you of course can share in the glory, hopefully.
It will be glory. I am paid to think positive.
I was trying to send a link to Resident on YouTube, but I've stuffed it up, so excuse me.
Oh, thanks. I love hearing myself back again. That's really scary, actually. Full stop. Any further debate on this item? If not, Councillor Harris, you need to sum up.
Yes, just very briefly, the speed is important. The speed must always be careful that we've got good tyres on the car and we don't have an accident on the way. So let's hope it goes ahead. There was a couple of little points, and one of them was raised the other day about the Indigenous sign on the site not being there. The important thing, particularly from one of the previous councillors here, that we talked about was before or when the building's finished, not a couple of years later, is we should have some sort of signage up there saying this is available for other groups and not wait 2 years after. So it's done in an earlier thing where those people that walk their dogs or various other things can communicate. I'm very confident that if we get this part done, we get the monies from the government and all those other things that just prior, I suppose, to I die or around that time, we'll have a decent club and perhaps my funeral could be there. So that's a 20-year timeline for it. No, please endorse it and let's go ahead with it.
Thank you. That concludes debate on a very sombre note. All those in favour?
We got it.
Against it is carried unanimously. Thank you, Broadview Football Club members who've come along tonight. There'll be no further discussion around the club tonight. I don't believe so. So you're welcome to stay for the balance of the meeting if you wish, and community members too, I should say. But if you see the need to rush off home to do something like, I don't know, comb the cat or wash dishes, or you're more than welcome. We won't take any offence.
No, we'll leave you there. Again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. On to the next item, 10.2, progress report on the Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan. Report is there. Recommendations on page 31. I'm sorry, members, my good glasses are broken, so I've got these chemist shop specials which work for about this far, and then you're all blurry, so I have to keep taking them off. I'm sorry for that. And occasionally I hesitate because of that. So is someone happy to move what's on page 31? Councillor Barnett,
Yes,
you should speak to it.
I'm glad that we've got emphasis on action, because this has been another sort of area that's needed a bit of a action happening. So I'm very pleased to move that, and noting that was further information from the director provided to us later this afternoon. As well, just explaining a bit more. To move it.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Harris, would you speak to it?
Yes, just one brief question. On 31, and then it continues on with the various things that the actions that we're going through. While it's a confidential item, we're having a discussion later tonight, that I'm hoping that if any of these positions and things that are in here or tasks of various areas may have to be changed or move along. So that's just that bit I'd like to say. But in the main, it's again a bit like the community club rooms. It takes a long time to get there, but I've spoken to a few people, Brendan and others, and some of the areas we'd like to go through and move ahead take a while, because not all people act quickly, and it makes it a bit hard for us to go ahead and do things. Not all parties are not disagreeing, but taking time to do things. But I'm glad to see it in here, same as the mover, Councillor Barnett, that said, and hopefully, I think it's early next year, we'll be up and running, and halfway through the year, we might be a heck of a long further on. So I'm endorsing it and hoping people support it.
Thank you. Any further debate? Deputy Mayor.
I'm going to support the motion, but having read through particularly the action plan, it is an action plan, but there's some elements that feel a little bit like a tick box exercise to me, and I don't know whether we've really gone as hard at this as we can. A couple of examples that I'll cite. We had a great session a couple of probably months ago now, a workshop. We've got a bus tour plan, which sounds like a very council thing to do to me. And I don't see a strategy around continuing the engagement for elected members that can be developed and rolled out on an ongoing basis. I see a couple of things that we've got, and my concern there is that we'll just we'll sort of, our interest will peak and then it will drop down again, and then this will come up as a concern a little bit down the track. So I would have liked to have seen a bit more work done to formulate a proper strategy which can be embedded and rolled out over a longer period of time. Another example is the last point with regards to the support, the involvement of at least one Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander. This sounds like it's saying that a small number of Aboriginal and local businesses have been involved. So therefore that's completed. It doesn't say anything about what else we're going to do to continue to foster that relationship and actually potentially go after businesses of that nature. So whilst some of these, I also understand there might be some questions raised later on about the site assessment for the Red Dead downstream, but some of them are clearly tasks which have been completed, but some of them feel like they've been ticked, and we're just going to move on. That feels, it doesn't feel like a great example of what we could be doing in this space. They're just my observations, so I'll definitely be supporting it But I feel like we could have done a bit more in some areas.
Thank you. Any further debate? From the chair, I'll probably concur with the last speaker. It's good to see a report on this, but I'll have to say we didn't see a report for a long time. The question was raised about had there actually been a RAP meeting, and the answer was no. I think for well over a year, and I just think for a group of elected members, it seemed to me to be pretty passionate about forging stronger relationships with our Kaurna past and present. Insisting on naming streets in Kaurna language and insisting on naming this building in Kaurna language for I don't know who to not have a meeting of the RAP committee for that period of time seems to me to be perhaps not understanding what the elected members want to achieve. And I perhaps leave it at that. But it's good to see the report trying to tie the loose ends together. I tend to agree with Deputy Mayor that some things seem to be easily ticked as complete here, and I think they're ongoing pieces of work. And perhaps there's a subsequent report that needs to come to us about how this has actually been implemented. For example, if I asked CEO you the question, how many Aboriginal staff have we employed since we picked up this Innovate RAP? How many staff have elected to go on a NAIDOC week activity that wasn't one that they were told by their manager to go and organise and do, as in go to a NAIDOC activity in Victoria Square or somewhere? If I asked how much of our procurement has gone to a Supply Nations registered supplier since this clause was changed, I suspect I know the answer. So to me, it's not a matter of just ticking boxes. We are hoping that this would lead to a change in culture and activity within the council, and I don't believe I've seen evidence that it has. And so I would encourage you, CEO, to bring back a report, perhaps quarterly, on this initiative, just to keep in touch with how this is impacting what council's doing, rather than just being able to fill out a report and send it off to the Reconciliation Australia mob in Canberra and say, aren't we good? I think they're looking for outcomes, not just what was being reported on. I'm very grateful to the Director for providing some extra information to us today. That is in response to questions raised at this morning's agenda review. So thank you for that extra detail. It's very helpful. And I think that would have made for a better report if it was incorporated. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. But essentially, I think I'm speaking on behalf of everybody saying that we're looking for a genuine change in culture and engagement. And my final note is that in terms of our other initiatives and in terms of our Makarrata and treaty process, we had a fantastic event on the 1st of October, which not everybody can get to. But it saddens me that motion to initiate that was passed a year ago, and we've had one event with regard to that motion, which specifically talks about community discussion. And I just want to leave that with your CEO, that I think this body of elected members has much higher expectations than that. And it falls in the same place as this, which I think is into a crack that we need to get out of. I think there's a lot of goodwill around this table to do more in this space. But I'm grateful that we have an update before us to even understand where it's at and ask these questions. So it's a very important amount of transparency. So thank you for that. Any further debate? If not, Councillor Barnett, wish to sum up?
Yes, just to say that in our community plan, it says a 2 to 5 year timeline, and PP 2.5 says about forming the treaty. So, I can understand a bit of frustration about it seeming to be a checklist of things, but that's, I guess the nature of how the reporting perhaps is done. But I agree with those saying that we would like more actual cultural change rather than just, steps going towards it. But again, we need to, I think the goodwill is there, and so we certainly need to build on that and not wait, another few years. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Next report, 10.3, the City of Prospect Annual Report. Recommendations on page 35 my apologies that the Mayor's forward has gotten to you so late and got to me on the weekend, I think. So there had to be some things clarified. So you have the final one with you. Hopefully you've had a chance to read it this afternoon. If not, I fully understand you don't want to move this night, it being incomplete, but I apologise that that bit of it came to me very late. So we have the recommendation here on page 35. Somebody happy to move it as it's currently expressed? Councillor Barnett?
Yes, I've read it all and made some suggestions.
Yeah.
Some of you have seen.
Yes.
I'm being told that some of those changes that, can be incorporated, particularly the photo one. Yeah, so happy to move.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Sorry, yes.
Yeah, that's a show. You're okay. That's no trouble.
They introduce you speak to it.
No, it's fine. Oh, no, sorry.
Any further debate? Councillor Barnett, would you like to sum up your wonderful speech?
No, I'm past wonderful summer.
Thank you. That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. Thank you, staff, for your input there. 10.4, the appointment of Deputy Mayor. Recommendations on page 37. Of course, we can't move that yet because there's a blank space in there. Let's move to suspend meeting. We'll ask you to suspend meeting procedures until 9 o'clock should we need it to take nominations. All those in favour? Against it is carried. And I'd call, therefore, for nominations should there be any.
Don't have.
Councillor Pitts, all
Sorry.
Yeah. Stop me. Sorry.
I just see it. I'd like to nominate councillor / deputy mayor as deputy mayor.
Can we have a name just for the benefit of the secretary?
Councillor / deputy mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Larwood, do you prepare to accept that nomination?
Councillor / Larwood, please on that.
Yeah.
From Councillor Rhodes. Yes, I'm happy to accept the nomination.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? There being no other nominations, I'll call us back into formal proceedings, and the Minister Secretary has inserted Councillor Larwood's name. Yeah, see, I knew what I was saying was true. It's been inserted. There it is. There at part 2. Somebody happy to move that way? Councillor Rip, I saw first. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, just obviously to thank Deputy Mayor Larwood for his work over the last 12 months and interest in matters in the East and being prepared to meet and come out and be across those issues. So I do thank you for your interest.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett, you happy to second that?
Yes, and I'm glad we've got the correct titles, not Deputy Lord Mayor.
It's never been, the word Lord has never been in print, Councillor, as you well know. Anything further? No. Any further debate? Councillor Rip, do you need to sum up? That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against it is carried unanimously. Congratulations to the Deputy Mayor. He's never going to lose that. It's not going to be in writing ever. 10.5, the policy review, the credit card policy. Again, staff, you've seen, I understand that the brave new world we have for reports and agenda papers, etc., is really, really, really good, except that it loses track changes if they come as a Word document. So staff have admitted that mistake and distributed the policy with track changes. Has everybody had a chance to have a look at that? I'll take, if there are any questions, I'll take that before I ask for a move or second, because I know you've only just got it. For a question?
A brief question.
Yep.
There was a clause which talked about repeat on definition of when a once-off or multiple purchase of the same thing.
Sorry, I haven't got a copy, so I can't follow you. So just carry on.
You can have mine.
There was a clause in here that talked about
Yes, it was.
if the card is used for the same purpose for multiple times. Does that then become automatically an account that's created to deal with that, or is there a policy
Are
on
they
that?
subsequent ones?
Let's see ya.
So I might ask the
Obvious.
Through the chair, you're referring, just to clarify, referring to the repeated personal use, that may be accidental.
Oh,
Is
no,
that correct? Or-
there was a clause around it, maybe I've got that confused.
What was it?
I thought there was a clause that said if you use the credit card for the same reason multiple times, then you wouldn't necessarily use the credit card for that sort of purchase. Kind of count also, not that, but I read that.
So through the mayor, yes, in essence, what a credit card is to do is to take care of small day-to-day purchasing that you wouldn't bother raising a purchase order for. It's to create efficiencies in day-to-day operations. But what you're not going to use it for is repeated purchasing from the same provider where you just raise a purchase order to track that purchasing. That's not the intent of a purchase card. Does that answer your question?
I guess my question was, I'm assuming staff are really clear about that. Because it seems like a good approach, but I just want to make sure that that's.
Yep, see ya.
Yes, so through the chair, the policy was consulted on it, and ultimately with me group as well. So they should be. Having said that, we're also now looking, this is adopted this evening at some training, which will be running in conjunction with Jim's team in finance, so that everyone understands the obligations there is the training for the plan. Yes, all right, thank you.
I think you're referring to 621B. Is that correct? I'll just make sure that we closed out that issue.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yes, 621B, thank you. So I just got there. So you're happy with that?
Yeah,
explanation?
and also that it's training provided to staff.
Yeah, thank you.
Around the changes that are.
Any further questions on the track
Yes.
changes? Yeah, Councillor Barnett.
Yeah, so Councillor De Backer and I were just wondering, so we've got both red and blue track changes, so what's what?
Yeah, thanks, CEO.
So through you, Mayor Lachlan, that's all about different chefs in the
Yeah.
kitchen. I can't recall exactly who it's.
Does it-
but-
does it-
Doesn't
That's
matter,
right.
but
One
they're
will be
added.
mine, and I think it will either be Chris or potentially even Alison Hancock at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. And then I also sent through some suggested changes, but they're not on here, and this is apparently what we're passing, so I just wondered how, if those changes were acceptable, how are they going to be included?
I think people put up with that changes, Christina, to just use plain language instead of turn their mind to, and the response was, well, that's what the ombudsman, his language. So just wanted, Councillor, where are you on that now?
Well, the ombudsman apparently doesn't use plain English, so I rest my case. And the other ones were about obviously Carl Holder and they and their, and it's just not grammatically correct. So I suggested simple change.
Feedback from staff was, I think, to have a minor administrative changes in the recommendation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can we see what it is? It's not there yet. Subject to minor administrative changes, we'll take care of the grammar.
Yes.
So I think any other questions on the track changes?
Probably a broader question. I'm just trying to how this links to procurement policy. So, for example, this is just fast track purchases like of smaller nature under a department or whatever. I would hope that our procurement policy would, so for example, if we run down to Coles and get something, whether it's individually wrapped in plastic 3 million times, or we're getting the green or local equivalent, how those smaller purchases, which would be a reasonable makeup of our purchases, how that is linked to our procurement.
So through you, Mayor Lachlan, firstly, look, all purchases on credit cards should be done with at least consideration of the procurement policy. The detail of your question, though, I would have to take.
Is it embedded in the policy though?
No, this is only a policy that deals with the use of credit cards.
Right.
The procurement policy deals with all purchasing, which will include credit card purchasing. However, routinely speaking, I think you flag the issue. Credit card purchasing tends to be of a nature that is reactive and near term in nature.
Mm-hmm.
A culture shift or a culture change for certain staff who may not necessarily consider, for example, things like single-use plastics or sustainability, is a broader, more significant question. And I'm not sure where we're at on that. Although my director corporate would like to address, she may be able to assist.
Thank you.
Director?
Through the chair, within the procurement one, there is a specific environmental sustainability aspect, paragraph of that. So the
In the
credit
procurement
card.
policy, not this one.
Oh,
so
okay.
that is
So
the
the marriage on
procurement
that.
policy on
Yeah,
the
so-
website. So there is a section on there about procurement on environmental friends.
Okay, so if I can refer you specifically with regards to that 611, the very first
Oh, okay,
terms
beautiful.
of
No,
use.
I'm happy with that.
Yep.
That's fine.
And also on the second page, there's a list of related documents, which, those of us who are employed or still employed people, you would say to the staffer who got in trouble, you're deemed to have read these documents, you can't escape.
Yeah.
The question is a good one, right?
Yeah, I was just, yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions on the track changes in particular before I ask for a move it?
Not the track changes,
Councillor
but just something a little bit contradicting under personal expenditure.
Pause.
A, 6.6, no, 6.2.2.
Yep.
Under A, personal expenditure is strictly prohibited on the credit card. And then when you go to B, but should the cardholder incur personal expense more than 3 times? To me, it just means like you've just said that you're not allowed to use the credit card for personal expenditure, but here it's saying, but if you use it 3 times, your credit card may be cancelled.
See ya.
So through you, Mayor Lachlan, I've been guilty myself of pulling the wrong card out of my wallet and tapping it on the chip reader. And you realise the moment after that thing goes beep that you have used the wrong card. I think the intent here is to ensure that staff are aware of the fact that that's the wrong thing to do and that they need to repay it within 7 days there under 6.2.2A. But of course, if they do it 3 times in a row, this is more than just an accident. And in that case, we might need to look at some counselling or potentially more. But we're not going to terminate someone for an accidental use of the credit card if they repay it within that 7 day period. It's meant to be a pragmatic approach to the problem of accidental use.
Yeah, thank you. Any further questions on the track changes? If not, somebody happy to, now that you've had a good chance to read it, somebody happy to move as per the screen, which includes the subject to minor administrative changes. If you just highlight that in yellow, thanks, the Minister Secretary. So we're really clear on what's been added to what's not on the papers. Someone happy to move what's on the screen. Councillor Barnett, wish to speak to it?
No.
Seconder, Councillor Ripp, wish to speak to it?
No, thanks.
Any further debate? Just for you to note, it's in the report that it's been right through the audit committee, who had a lot to say about it as well. There's no further debate.
No.
Councillor Barnett doesn't need to sum up. I'll take the vote. All those in favour, against, it's carried unanimously. Thank you. 10.6, next report, minutes from the Chief Executive Officer Performance Development and Review Committee and Variation Service Agreement. It's been through the CEO Performance Development Committee. So be happy to move it in its current form. Councillor Group, wish to speak to it?
Look, I won't speak to it. It's fairly self-explanatory, so happy not to.
Thank you. Do a seconder? Deputy Mayor, wish to speak to it?
I agree with the former Deputy Mayor. I agree it's fairly self-explanatory.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Any further debate from Lord Councillors? There being none, Councillor Group, wish to sum up?
I do not.
That concludes the debate. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. Thank you. General business, item 11 is the next item for urgent items. Are there any urgent items?
Just one more seek clarification before I actually, if we need to move something like this.
Yep.
But in the last council meeting, 10.2 disability action and inclusion plan, we obviously that item was lost. I was cognizant at the time that it was sensitivity, or there's some sensitivities around deadlines to meet reporting to the state government, and I haven't seen anything come back to us at this council meeting for a further report or update. Are we expecting something to come in just like next month back to council, or do I need to formally move? I'm happy to formally move the disability action and inclusion plan, that we receive a further report that comes back to us in the December council meeting. But there's no point doing that at the start, planning to do that. But I haven't seen it in the workshop forward that is coming back.
Thanks for that question without notice.
Well,
in the wrong section.
I could formally move it, but
CEO, can you give us some guidance about if we need a motion such as that?
So through you, Mayor Lachlan, I might ask my director to address portions of that, but Members, you all will have received an update on where we're tracking with the Disability Action Inclusion Plan. And with that in mind, I'd ask Ginny to take the question.
Thank you, Director.
Through the chair, members will have received a memo from myself last Friday explaining where we're up to and where Victor will take over the project and we'll have a report back to the December gap analysis. And
Thank you. Satisfies your needs, so no need for an urgent item.
No.
Thank you. Any further, councillor Group?
Just another possible urgent item. I just want to acknowledge that the management government had sent through the email about the integrated transport plan. I hadn't seen that because I've obviously swiped left or right, not sure which way, and gone straight to my delete item. So I just wanted to acknowledge that it had been sent. Apologies to the for not seeing it, but I've now seen it. I'm not sure if that's an urgent item or not, but
I'm pretty sure you are sure.
not me.
You sure?
You sure?
Okay, if there aren't any at all, really, urgent items, I'll move on to item 12, reports for information. We have the protocol. We'll move these on block unless something is withdrawn. Does anybody wish to withdraw item 12.1, the mayoral monthly activity report? Deputy Mayor wishes to. Does anybody wish to withdraw item 12.2, the audit committee minutes? No. Does anybody wish to withdraw item 12.3, the annual financial statements for the year? Nothing. I will withdraw those for myself. Item 12.4, does anybody wish to withdraw the bi-monthly projects report? I will withdraw that then from the chair. Item 12.5, section 270, request for review annual summary update. Recommendations on page 161. Is that recommendation changed?
Hopefully the recommended change, yes, it can be. That's the meeting, yes. So there is a suggested slight tweak to that.
There is a suggested change there, so I will withdraw that from the chair. Someone wish to move on block, then item 12.2. Thank you, Councillor De Backer. There is no debate, of course. So I'm moving on block. Someone wish to second it? I think I saw Councillor Group first. That concludes the debate that we don't have on these items. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 12.1, Deputy Mayor, did you wish to move it and speak to it, or did you have a question?
Move and speak to it.
Okay, far away.
I was fortunate enough to attend the AGM for the Friends of the Library first. They couldn't stay for the whole night. But it got me thinking about that as one of our sort of community groups and what its role is. It probably started off playing a different role than what it plays now back in the day when we were at the Thomas Street Centre, and which had a very much a community vibe to it, as we all know. They were probably one of the groups responsible for helping to build the demand for the library, which we're now thankful that we've got. But I just wonder, and Christine might want to jump in because she's heavily involved in that group. I just wonder if there's an opportunity to sort of reconsider how that group might operate, what it might do, because there's a bunch of people who have been volunteering for many years there, and there's definitely value in having them involved in some way, shape or form. But is it, I don't want to say, is it sort of suited its purpose and now is there any reason to continue, or how can it continue to maintain relevance and add value beyond what it currently does? How could it, to an extent, try to refactor what it does, which might attract a different range of people to volunteer and be part of it as well? So, it's great to see people contributing. How can we help them get a bit more value and add a bit more value? So just a bit of a thought bubble as well, but yeah, that's just my observations.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it and speak.
Councillor Barnett.
Yes, so thank you for the Deputy Mayor for attending, and he presented a Premier certificate to the Treasurer of the Friends of the Prospect Library for outstanding volunteer service, 18 years, which in this day and age is deserves a gold medal most probably. So the Friends of the Prospect Library, I'm pleased to report, they have reinvigorated themselves, and we have a chairperson, Julia Archer. We have a full committee and full and a new committee member as well, who's very active involved in the local community area. So that Friends of the Prospect Library Committee will be meeting and engaging with its members and supporters, of which it has over 68, I think, at the last count, and be looking at the role of the library. It was spoken and mentioned with the manager of the library, that will be looking at what other activities and other roles, because obviously things have changed. Moving here has changed things, but there are still plenty of other roles that such a group could play. It also plays a very important part in auspicing Prospect Local History Group. So I think a lot of people don't make that connection. So we'll be forwarding the papers that were presented at the report of the Secretary on behalf of Friends of the Library, the report from the Prospect Local History Group, and the report from the Family History Group, which is also auspiced of Friends of the Library. So we can forward those information so that elected members are a bit more fully informed. Thank you.
Look forward to it. Any further debate? Just from my point of view, thank you, Deputy Mayor, for filling in for me there. It's important to have a Deputy Mayor that can do those things, and being away, that worked well for me. Thank you. And otherwise, I commend the report to you. Any further debate? If not, Deputy Mayor, you should sum up.
Just very briefly, so I wasn't to casting aspersions when Ben spoke and talked about all the things that we were doing. I don't know how involved and what the connection is, and I wondered whether there was a better opportunity to become, if there isn't already, more connected with what Ben and his team are doing, and then determine the best way to add value. But yeah, a lot of admiration to that group for the work they've done over the years.
Indeed. That concludes the debate. All those in favour? This is carried unanimously. Next item withdrawn was the annual financial statements for year ending 30th of June 2021. Happy for someone to move it, then I can raise my comments in debate. So I'm happy to move it in its current form. Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak to it?
Have to move it to get on the floor and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Britt, do you wish to speak to it?
Ditto.
Thank you. Then as I'll put it out, just I want to draw your attention to a couple of things that I thought were pertinent to note in that report. These things take a while to come through to us, and it's all about the past. But there are some things in the past that we should pay attention to. The first one of those is on page 86, which is the final outcome as declared by staff and validated by the auditor as in what was the financial position at the end of the year. I always looked at what we said we'd do at the beginning of the year. Everything that happens in between is like, the Kenwood mixmaster dealing with life. But there, we have 2 points at which this body makes the most important decision. That's setting the budget and then finally seeing what happens to the budget. And halfway down the page, there's a critical line in there which says budget versus actual, second paragraph under that. Council's original budget projected an operating deficit of 624,000 for the year. The actual result is a net unfavourable variance of 152,000 compared to the original budget. So it's not good news, but the variance of 152 is, I think, acceptable in the context of the revaluation of our assets we recently had, which was a very large shock, and in the context of things that have happened along the way. And I thought on balance, I wasn't super comfortable, but I was more comfortable that we were within 150 grand of where we said we'd be, at a budget that's 28 million bucks or whatever it is. I thought that wasn't a bad result overall. So thank you to the staff for getting us back to that. I know there's been a bit of a roller coaster to get us to that point, but I do think it's worth commenting on, and that's what I'm doing. Second comment I've got is on page 89, and that relates to our loan principal about halfway down the page again. Council's loan principal outstanding is approximately 15.3 million, made up of LGFA loans, 1.1 secured to the footy club. So Council's net debt is 14.2. And I think if we reflected on where we thought we'd be at the end of this year, that number is under where we thought we'd be. So again, I think that's a reflection of two things, and that is good treasury management by staff, And the second is that we have not done what we said we would do. So we haven't had to borrow as much as we thought we might. So whilst it looks like good news, it's actually, in my view, not. There's a line underneath that which says capital expenditure for the year was 6.5 million, about 58 on renewing and replacing and 42 on new and upgraded. You're going to hear more about that, I suspect, in the next 12 months as staff really help us with the asset management plan and say you've got old assets that are ageing, you need to focus a lot of money on that and be careful every time you build something new. That money is not fixing something that's old. Everything new attracts a depreciation allowance straight away. And you would have read in the paper somewhere that this building's costing us 215 grand or something a year on depreciation. So that's what happens to these things that we do. So I thought that was another interesting line to note. But perhaps on page 90 is where I've reserved some comments which are not so sort of observational and favourable, and that is on the carry forwards list. Page 90. None of you will be surprised that I raised the carry forwards list, and I'm just, again, incredibly disappointed that we've had capital projects of 1.9 million that have been carried forward. That means we did not get them done as we were told they would be done. Remember that the budget is constructed by staff and we agree to it. We certainly ask for things to be in it and out of it, but we don't cash flow projects. We rely upon staff who tell us what the cash flow will be, and they have not met their own intention by the tune of 1.9 million. That's a fairly large chunk out of our project budget, and I think that's very disappointing. We have a CEO sitting next to us. You, sir, have been chosen because you promised to fix this in your application and your interviews, and we hope that you do. I think on behalf of the community, this is embarrassing. We collect taxes off them, we make promises to them, and I always get very uncomfortable when I read a list like this in terms of what's not been delivered. And in particular, and I've asked questions elsewhere, I'm just going to make a comment. I find it, some of these you could say, well, there's good reasons why. I don't think there are good enough reasons on many of these at all. And I particularly point out bus shelter upgrades and footpath construction. In my view, there is absolutely no good reason why those things can't have been fully expended within the calendar year. And I would find it very difficult to have an acceptable explanation other than we just didn't get around to it, and that's not acceptable in my view. So I just want to point that out and make it really clear that whilst overall I'm happy with the outcome, some of it is because we didn't do what we promised that we would do. Going forward, we're going to have a pretty challenging budget cycle next year. I was trying to reflect on when they haven't been, and it's kind of sad that we never have enough headroom in our budget to be comfortable. It's just been really tough the last few years for reasons that are not of our own making. This building we've certainly formed it and shaped it, but none of us, when we ran for office before our lease was discontinued at the Thomas Street Centre, ever anticipated we'd have to build this building. And this is, whilst it's wonderful, has caused a huge amount of pressure in our budgets over several years. So we have what we have, we've got to deal with it, and now we have a reevaluation and an asset management process going forward, which we absolutely need to get on top of, because that has put huge, huge pressure on the budgets going forward. So thank you for this report, and I look forward with trepidation to the draft annual budget for next year. Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Backer.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank the Mayor for pulling this out, and certainly it's been a frustration of mine. And I think we have to put it in terms, for the public to understand. So basically, we've got an old house, be it our old streets, and we've had the, money in the bank for the gutters to be replaced, and guess what? Being done. At Stitch and Time Saves None, because the gutters have been leaking, it's causing problems with moisture, and more problems are happening. So if we don't get on top of this basic stuff, it's our service level to our ratepayers. And compounding that, that's catch up for next year. So you're draining resources for other projects. And I said to the Mayor this morning, all the innovative, community focused, community building projects that we'd like to put forward, we're not putting them forward because of time. We're just not putting them forward because we don't trust the staff to get them done. And so there are challenges, and I get that, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that we've got our depot at Campbelltown. I'm not happy about it. I don't think it's the most effective way to run some of our services, and that's for another discussion. But there's, yeah, some of these things might be contracted out to contractors, and that's just getting into gear and getting it done at the beginning of the year and getting things done instead of just, oh yeah, we'll get to it. So it's really disappointing. So I think there's the two things that are the issue. One, it compounds our human resources demands for next year, and two, you know, we've got a really aspirational council around the table, and we're just going, well, we're not even getting the projects we put up 2 years ago, leasing, licensing, you know, bus shelters, DDA compliance, some basic stuff. And look, I'm really encouraged that with the enthusiasm of the new CEO, with our oversight, how we can have a look at better ways to do things.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I mean, I think it's been compounded because we've had so many grants that we've never had in our entire life of the council, I don't think. And so, you know, when we have the budget discussions and that, we made the bed and I guess we've got to lie in it, but so I think it's partly our ambitious things and our accepting that we'll take the presents that have been given to us. But as we always know with the grants, there are always the what happens after things. So at any rate, but you know, we've done it, and so now we know we're at this point, and we've got the CEOs coming up with some ideas, and so we just say, you know, right, well, it is what it is, and we just have to manage it better, and I'm hopeful that that will happen.
Thank you. Any further debate? If not, Deputy Mayor, you should sum up.
We've clearly given the new CEO direction in this area. It's been something that's occurred over the last 3 to 4 years, and every year we talk about how disappointed we are that it occurs again. There's been a lot of change over the last 2 to 3 years. There are some extenuating circumstances, but a lot of these things that are sitting there waiting to be done seem fairly simple and part of operations to me. They're not part of the special projects side of things, and so therefore I think that that excuse doesn't necessarily hold water. But very much looking forward to the new CEO getting his head around why this happens and then working out why it happens and then stopping that. And I'm sure the next reports we get will see a significant turnaround.
Thank you. Yeah, no pressure, got said under his breath. What were you thinking behind that? Now that concludes the debate. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. Okay, next one, withdrawn was item 12.4, the bi-monthly progress report. Again, withdrawn by myself. Somebody happy to move it and get it on the floor. Councillor De Backer, do you wish to speak to it?
No.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Ripp, do you wish to speak to it? Then having withdrawn it, I'll go first into debate. Apologies, as I just try and catch up to the item. This report I always find pretty important because, you know, it's one thing to talk about carry forwards and projects that haven't made the grade, and you find out, you know, in November, this meeting, what didn't get done by June 30, but it's too late. I mean, that water's not just under the bridge, it's out to the ocean, along with the fish. Right? The best time to work out whether things are going swimmingly, just to continue that analogy, or not, is to look at this report. And this project's report, I think, is getting better in terms of its simplicity. It cuts to the chase. It's got traffic light colours on it. It's got some photographs. And I think the format of this is working much better than previous versions we've had here. But I have challenged a couple of things around this report, and so accuracy in here is really important. And I've spoken to the CEO and staff around this. When these reports are really good, they can't fib, they can't sort of make things up because they're tied into spending. They're directly tied into the general ledger or whatever it's called nowadays. And a good example of where you know you can be too positive about these things, but they're they're actually not on track. Is the Livingston Avenue Drainage Reconstruction program there, which we've had funded for some time, but we've got in here that's not going to commence until April 2022. But the status of that is green. Now, I just can't fathom how that box could be green, in my view. So I'm just providing feedback. I don't think it can be with, and if and a subsequent report comes back saying, well, council, you approved that new delayed timeframe, I'll then never ever approve another one again, because what that would mean is we've acquiesced in their expectations. I think it should be really clear when we accept these things. If there's a grant outcome given, then that is the date we've got to deliver it by, no matter what. And if we are late, we have to admit that we are late, no matter what we approve subsequent to that date, in my view, talking at a high level. I think the same is true of the Churchill Road Drainage Project, which says it's lovingly on time, but on time for the drainage program, I see here, takes it out to, I'm not quite sure where, but it's some magical time in the future. And so we don't have an ability to track what that is. And, there's their finish in June 23, and it won't even start until November 22. Now, that's a huge amount. That's a year away before we start digging a hole for this drain to help prevent flooding in the lower reaches of our city. Now, I don't know that if we went back to the grant funder and said that's what we're going to do, that they'd think that we were on time. Similarly, with the next one, Broadview Community and Sports Hub, we've heard about the department wanting us to know whether we're going to break ground in January, because that's what the grant terms say. And yet here we know we're not going to do it until June. But here, the timing program box is coloured in green. Now, it's just feedback. I just encourage the CEO to make sure these are accurate and honest. We've got to be, transparent about what's happening. And if you want to come to us and say we're behind here and here's a good reason, then fine. But that's my feedback, is that these are not fully transparent, and we're not being honest with ourselves about where we're at with these key projects. So, in fact, that is feedback. I'm not going to oppose the recommendation because it's an information report, but I wanted to highlight those things. So any further debate? Councillor Harris, I saw first.
Look, just to add things, I'm going to support it in the pretty pictures on 155, and on the next page, 156. The first one's about the Balfour Street, which I have spoken to the director in the area, but I still have that concern. This is going to be done during the school holidays, fix this alignment of number 16, 16A and B. But I was hoping, which I actually originally thought it was about the school crossing there, and that hopefully should have been here to fit in the same timeline as the school holidays. What was explained to me, that it might be coming from DIPT, so I'm just sort of asking that, can we look at trying to see if that fits in the same time, in that school holidays to come. That's page.
Did you want to answer that question from start?
Oh, if I could, but I don't know if I can. I'm just asking, can they do it?
I'll put the question, CEO.
I'd have to refer that back to the Director of
Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we believe it is looking to time works in January school holidays. We have received correspondence from them to that regard. We believe they're on track with that delivery. In regard to why it's not included here, we only include projects here that we're actually directly delivering. So things like the school crossing, and although the football club, for instance, those upgrades that go ahead aren't listed in here either. There's some things like that we could start including, I guess, but they're not actually part of our structured project delivery as called out in the business plan.
So in answer to the councillor's question, this thing that's referred to here might be delivered in a different week to the crossing, because that's by other people.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor.
It's blocked at the same time. And the next one is on page 56, and it's more a statement that maybe some of the people, a newer director and that might not know we're doing the footpath part, and it's going to fix up some things from Galway down to Potaway and Colin Grove and fixing, and in amongst it, the reason I'm raising it is the curbs and ramps that are being done. If you look at the picture, we used to have a previous director, I don't want to say his name, good, or his nationality, good. But so I'll say that I've spent a lot of time there with the broom after any downpour of rain, clearing that ramp out onto the footpath, because it, particularly with the dolomite, it fills up and it's a very bad corner for our drain problem. So it goes away, but if a big rain hits, it's a swimming pool for thing, and it ruins that ramp. So that ramp could be a fire. Apart from that, I just want to endorse what the couple of points the Mayor said, that that some of these projects, you think, oh, we're great, they're done, or they're nearly finished, and you go past and they're not quite at that stage. So I don't know, I wouldn't use the word dishonest, but sometimes we might put them down a little bit quicker than they're actually being done. So I endorse them, and hopefully we get a lot more done sooner.
Thank you. Any further debate? If not, Councillor Debacki, you've got the right to sum up, but you deemed to have already spoken to the motion.
Okay.
You have the floor.
That's fine. No, like I said, I think you can sense the frustration in some of the issues, and again, just coming back to some of the things in the capital work status report. When things are completed or done, how are we communicating them? Where's the happy smiling photos of things being done? And so I think similar to the comments before about infrastructure projects over here and community over here, there needs to be that crossover. So I think we should celebrate the wins we do have and tell everyone about it, but certainly we're pretty disappointed with some of the outcomes or lags.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. All those in favour? Yes, carried unanimously. Next item was item 12.5, section 270, a request for review annual summary update, and I think the staff have got an extra recommendation here which relates to a question I raised earlier about when do we get this report, and is it in a system somewhere so we're guaranteed to get it, and what happens with ombudsman matters that were reported in the paper a few weeks ago. So the staff tried to endeavour to say, well, let's combine that in one report in the future to make it really clear that we'll get to have some insight into what the ombudsman's been dealing with, to the extent that he's happy to, or she, to reveal that. So that's why there's an extra thing. Somebody happy to move it as on the screen? Councillor Barnett?
Yes.
Would you speak to it? No, we'll do have a seconder. Councillor Group, would you speak to it?
Yeah, just a question in terms of the terminology, we're known and permissible. So we're known makes sense. So when we know about it, permissible, is that around release of information from the ombudsman? And is it possible that administration might know about it but can't share it with the
So yeah.
Through you, Mayor Lachlan, yes and yes. So there are occasions when the Ombudsman will engage with us on a matter and require that information be very strictly held. Sometimes so tightly that I can't share it even with my own staff. And it's those sorts of situations.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you. Any further debate? Just from my point of view, the reason I've asked for this, and I've actually asked for a calendar of governance reporting in general to be considered, is that I don't like being ambushed by the advertiser about, someone reporting somewhere about how many people complained about us and we didn't know about it. And also, I think if there've been a lot of complaints along the same line, it'd be good for us to know that those people are unhappy about the same sort of thing, because then we've obviously got a system problem. If it's on a whole heap of different matters, then that might be a customer service problem. But I just think it's healthy for us to know what is vexing people so much that they'd either ask for a Section 270 or an Ombudsman's inquiry. I think we would be a better council if we were across what made people grumpy and helped the CEO and staff work out how to have better policies, procedures or systems so they didn't feel they had that need. And can only do that if we can see it, hence the suggestion for an annual report that picks up both. Having said that, and read the report, I haven't been able to identify any trends that give me great concern. Other than I think there's been some matters about driveway crossovers and nature strips where we probably need to just make our policy a little clearer. I think we've asked for that, and it'll come to us at some point. But I couldn't pick up any consistencies beyond that. They seem to me to be not healthy, but I won't say that, but a level of inquiry which didn't indicate we had some fundamental problems to deal with. But if others feel differently and you think there's things we should improve on, then say so. But I didn't see that, which I was, somewhat comforted by. Any further debate?
Not very spoken. Can I ask a brief question?
Brief question, yeah.
So the summary of the three reviews, which is not many, so tick, 2 in September and 1 in December. Is it likely the 2 in September will from one entity?
So yeah.
Through the chair, no, they were from two different people.
It's unusual that place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further debate? If not, Councillor Bunnett, do you wish to sum up?
No.
Thank you. That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. Okay, next item is the council member reports and briefings. Are there any? If not, we'll move on to motions on notice, item 14.1. Notice of motion on temporary time parking for Olive Street in the BU car park. It's moved by myself, so I'll move straight to it. You have the motion in front of you. I don't intend to read it out as the newly adopted protocol. The issue has arisen because we have sustained complaints about car parking around the precinct. The study will tell us whether they're actual or perceived. I think in the instance of our car park during the day at the back here, they are actual, and they are driven in large part by construction vehicles using our car park. Now, I regret that staff have not been able to resolve this by including a condition in the development approval or in the traffic management plan approval that said that contractors could not park in our car park. I'm sure that was a sentiment of elected members, but it doesn't appear to have been carried through into a document that we can enforce on the building next door. And we've also had complaints from people in Olive Street, and from those who are dropping children off at the childcare centre and the primary school, that there are less and less spaces available to them because of the way that the construction vehicles are using the street. Coincident with that is that the basement slab has been poured for the building next door. I'm aware that it has a number of car parks that are allocated in the final design, and in my view, they can be activated now. It's very common for contractors to park on site, and in my view, they should be using that for contracted vehicles. At this stage, they've elected not to. They keep it fenced off. They're not even building a temporary ramp, and they're simply directing their contracted vehicles to park wherever they want, which is our car park for our users of this building and along Olive Street, which already has a heavy demand on it. So I've asked for a motion notice to come here to say we've got to regulate this better. We've got to make sure there's car parking available for users of this building, and I'm not sure if you have. I've certainly received complaints about people not being able to find a park to use this building, and I believe this is a way of solving it. I don't think this should last forever. The expected completion date of the building is April. I think May allows for that to tail off with defects and make sure that covers that period. I think this should be very short term. And I also think that we should not be tough on residents who are seeking to park in the street. This is not preempting or foreshadowing how we might treat permits elsewhere. That needs to wait for our precinct study to come back and our citywide study to come back. But we do need to be cognizant that there's some local demand from local users of the street that I didn't want to unnecessarily compromise. And also part 4 is that the parking blitz seemed to work well elsewhere in modifying behaviour. It earned us some money, but I think what we saw was greater compliance, which is essentially what we're after. Greater compliance means that parking spaces free up and become available for other visitors. And that's really critical for the businesses. Businesses don't need people parking all day in parks that should be for people coming for a meal or a coffee or a meeting or whatever it is, short-term parking. So I'm part 4 asking to support getting the CEO to consider another parking blitz around this. There are some potential impacts on where the construction vehicles will park that can't fit in the basement. You might look out when you leave tonight. We have granted them the whole side, the whole eastern side of the car park up until our boundary. So they have a substantial amount of space in the open air that are already car parks. They're choosing to use them to store materials. I think the building's got a roof on it now. They can store them inside, in my view. They might think I'm a bit harsh, but I think we have a car park out the back that has severe restrictions on it, and we need to free it up. And they have some of our car parking in a fence zone that this motion is not seeking to take away from them. That's the essence of why this motion is before us, and I seek support to get some rigour into how this matter is dealt with and put some pressure on the builder to open up the basement to park the cars of the tradespeople that are building the building. I'm grateful for a second. Councillor Harris, wish to speak.
Yes, but I will just, it will still be part of my spiel, so I'm not asking for extra. When I believe you raised it earlier, or comments came up earlier about this, I had a look, and the position about getting in the car park at the bottom wouldn't be on unless they build that ramp and shift things around. So it's not that they can just go in there, they've got to do a bit of work for it, which I have got a problem saying they should do it, but I'm just saying that's a problem. In the other side, I'm supporting it because when people, they get subcontractors to come in heaps to do various little bits, they come quite often with their youth type equipment, but with a trailer as well. So it's not even generally just a single vehicle that's coming. They've got a trailer attached to it, so it's 2 lots apart. So if we can do something for those people that live in that group around there, and I think we should be doing it. So I'm quite happy to support this motion.
Thank you. Further debate?
Yeah.
Councillor Barnett, I'll start with.
Yes,
I'm not calling the winner of the
I mean, I've had no doubt that other parts of staff also got complaints from people in Vine Street. They have the same problem as people in Olive Street. So I don't know why one's been favoured over the other. Vine Street is just chock-a-block, right, almost right, or usually right down to the end of the street. So I'm just wondering if we can't do something about Vine Street and offer them the same as the Olive Street people.
I'm sorry, I'm happy to address it by summing up, but it's open to you, Councillor, if you wish to move an amendment, then it's open to you. If you don't, I'll move to the next speaker.
Yes, well, I'll test the floor and hopefully, so amendment that the temporary timed parking from the beginning, just in part 1 from
Sorry, where are you looking, Councillor?
that's fine. Oh, all right then. So replace Olive Street residential streets within 200 of the development. Meters.
Yeah, sorry. That could work. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'll just keep on
you do yours.
with the I think it sort of gets the same, thing. So now I've lost it.
Just to hold the rear car park and Olive Street. You wishing to
include and Vine Street.
And Vine and Olive Streets?
Yes, and so assuming we're put that's up from Prospect Road to Braun Road, because otherwise it could be right down the other end, Olive Street and Vine Street.
So you might wish to clarify that in your proposal.
Well, I'm trying to work out where it is. All right, okay,
You're saying 2 Braun Road?
yes. And I think the same should be with Olive Street to Vaughan Road, from Prospect Road to Vaughan Road.
Sorry, Mr Secretary, I'm taking it as Olive Street and Vine Street in there, yes, to Braun Road. Councillor.
Right. So, and the resultant flow impacts the Olive Street and Vine Street.
Sorry.
Third line down. Impact Olive Street and Vine Street.
Oh, okay, but Olive Street and Vine Street, yes.
Yeah, yeah, so just making it an equitable process. Because both streets have been severely impacted and it's very hard to find the car. And I've been having people say that they're parking over on the other side, most probably in Wilcox and Flora, and then walking across here.
I presume in part 2 you want to change from Olive to Olive Street and Vine Street in part 2 for the
yes
permits in both lines?
Yes.
Okay.
I've had more complaints actually from the Vine Street residents and the Olive Street residents that the Olive Street may have put theirs to someone else.
Okay, can I assume, Councillor, that it is the extent of your proposed amendment?
Pardon?
Is that what you're choosing to amend?
Yes, so, well, I'd like to read it through now.
Can you, yep, do that.
Just move down. Thanks. Hmm? Oh, well, you can have it.
I'll wait till the CEO's back.
CEO has appointed the Director of Corporate Services as a temporary CEO of Alternative. Lucky you. Sorry, Councillor.
Yes, I'm happy with that.
Happy with that amendment. Okay.
Yes, I think.
So I had a question.
Question.
Brief question.
Is it possible to suspend meeting procedures for a period of about 15 minutes to discuss?
That may be helpful.
Yes.
All those in favour of suspending meeting procedures until 10 p.m. All those in favour? All those against? Meeting procedures are thus suspended. Thank you. Who wishes to speak first? Alison, is it?
Yeah.
I'll have a go. So I had similar concerns about this.
Well, she asked for it to be suspended.
I had similar concerns about this. I think it's just getting the word and the amendment right, because I was proposed foreshadowing possibly an amendment about 200 metres within the radius of the development, which includes olive, vine, and Flora, and potentially other areas. And the reason I say this is, if this is development focused, it's also going to happen at Harrison. It's going to happen on any, and we're going to get the same issues. So we need consistency, and I hate the fact that we're so hypocritical. We've just had complaints across there. It's going to take in 2 years, whereas it's on our patch. It's like, oh, we'll just change the policy.
Yeah, that's.
And it's like, you know, you can't. I understand the intent, and I understand we're getting lobbied, but this is, you know, you look at Myrtle Street, you look at all these streets. If it's the development causing the issue, we already have terminology about radius of notification. If we had a consistent policy around this major development, and we could also build in the funding of some of those temporary parking controls for the developers to say, well, okay, we can grant you access to your contractors. However, all these people around get temporary parking permits and things like that. I'd be happy with consistent policy. So that was my sentiment, but I'd like to hear.
So there's a comment, Mark.
So I'm going to talk about that maybe more broadly. We can talk about anything right now, I presume.
Unfortunately, yes.
So I totally agree with what Alex is saying, and I think I agree with some of the intent of Christina's amendment. But normally I'd get very excited about parking controls. It's the same I've been going on for 10 years. But I don't feel myself getting excited about this because it does feel like it's a bit of a need, not a knee-jerk reaction. I think it's absolutely responding to a need, which is there. I totally agree with the mayor. But a couple of things I've thought about is Olive and Vine. The radius is actually a really good idea, and that might sway them. But what about weekends and public holidays? Do we expect the same level of control in those times when the contractors aren't there? The obvious question, well, where the hell do they go? Because if they're not going to go there, they're going to go 100 metres or 200 metres, 300 metres beyond that. They're still coming. They've still got to work. They've still got to bring their shovels and their jackhammers and whatever else. So we're not solving the problem. We're just pushing it further away. This is the problem by not having an integrated transport plan, because we're dealing with one street or two or a radius around the building. We're not dealing with the issue, and that's why we're concerned. I also don't know if this impacts on staff. I don't know if staff park there now, so I presume do they get a permit to allow them to park for the day or not? There's lots in this, and the intent I'm inside cheering that we're talking about this. I love the thought of giving people permits. We should give more people permits. You know that. That's my view. And I will see if we do this. I'll absolutely be referring to this as a precedent. But it just feels like we're dealing with one very small issue, and I don't know we've got the policy levers right. I really like the idea of the radius. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm just worried that they have to go somewhere. So they're going to go across the road to Spargo, or they're going to go, I don't know. Where are they going to go?
We have the chat tonight, public question.
Yeah. So his problems don't get worse.
Yeah.
Because he's going to have a contract with the trailer outside his house.
Exactly.
So my view is, just to answer, my view is they've got a perfectly good basement that they're not using at all and they're refusing to use. So somehow we've got to encourage them to do it. And if I could, all cards on the table, I'm incredibly unhappy with how our staff have not been able to negotiate that answer at all in any way. And they have not given us any powers to enforce that in any way at the setting up this agreement. Now that's water under the bridge, gone, right? So what do we do in the absence of anything initiated by staff? We need to direct staff to do something different. Now I'm happy to take an alternative of some sort. I think all the way down Vine Street to Braun is probably too far. The 200 metres is, doesn't get down to the school, but it's something.
Where does 200 metres go?
Well, even,
About
okay, so it could
halfway.
be 200, 250, but this is a consistent.
The issue is we've got some compression happening because of a problem that I think can be fixed on the site of the project. If there was no alternative, I would agree. This is an embarrassment that can't be resolved, but I believe it can be to a large extent. And some of these contractors will just cop the fine if they're there all day, and that's what they do in the city. They pay parking fees in the job in the city. They drive to it. They put their car in a parking station, and they pay a fee. We don't have a parking station. They will need to find a place to put their car.
Just to your point, from Prospect Road to Braun Road is exactly 200 metres.
Well,
is it?
there
It's
you
two-
go.
that's 200.
There you go.
There you
If Christina knew she'd walk it. That's not diameter, that's not, or sorry, radius.
Radius,
It's not
yeah, so there'll be
but that's
some-
That's linear.
flies between two.
Yeah. Because my question, oh, sorry.
So we'll just go to Matt
Yeah.
first.
I'm assuming that a builder doesn't have to put forward a parking plan to tell us how they're going to deal with these sorts of situations when they're putting forward a proposal.
See ya.
Because they're well aware that there will be issues.
Scamming.
Question for traffic. Traffic impact statement of traffic management is often required by the assets team, but that's more in relation to the other exposures, rain arrivals, departures, things like that. There's no ability to legally condition where people park while they do the development, but there is an ability to talk about it through a traffic impact statement.
So is that English for, not as it stands, but we could broaden the terms of a traffic management plan? But the same sort of thing happened down at Allen Street for quite a while. That was a disaster for the people who lived there because it's an even smaller, more compacted zone. So is that if we could actually tweak up the wording there and ask them to?
Not part of the development approval, but part of the Local Government Act processes around road closures, and to talk about a number of elements. It should be a stretch to talk about where people park, because It's just dealing with road. Road safety conversion. Which is a small for the park, small for the park. So I think it's challenged around where the notwithstanding, I agree with the basement is currently, if the ramp is installed, this could be resolved. They've elected not to do that. Vincent's telling us a couple of discussions to prompt them that way. But that hasn't been something they have an appetite for.
So I just want to clarify, it's actually, sorry, I totally got my measurements wrong, it's actually 400 metres to broad. It said 200 initially, I thought that's really odd, but that's what I said. Sorry, 400. 200 takes you to the Prospect Oval.
Well, that leads me to say, are we then going to put a sign down those streets saying end of 200 metres? Because
You have a parking sign that says 2 hours that way, not that way. That's how you do it.
oh, all right.
Yeah, that's how you do it.
Sorry. That where you finish, yeah. My only concern with all of my only concern with all this, support the intent behind it because it is an issue, but unfortunately, the perception in the community will be on consistency. It would be okay. Well, the council doesn't allow residential tenants anywhere, and they keep saying that in rhetoric, whatever term you want to use, rhetoric, policy, well, that they won't be granted. So then, if we do this for our building or the precinct, it'll be like will be seen to be hypocritical, even though I support the intent behind it because I know it's a problem. The other thing is time parking goes through a process for community consultation and it's extensive and it irritates residents. And if we just put this in, it's going to be seen as, oh, geez, rushed. Where's the consultation? That's the only issue I can see with it. I fully support it, and this is maybe a broader thing for the policy that we do need to, it needs to be maybe a more flexible policy because you're dealing with an immediate issue of development. And let's look beyond our building. When we further and have development right across the city, these issues aren't just issues around our building. These issues are on development right across our city. So how are we going to manage that? Each time are we going to be bringing up, and this is good motion, but are we going to be bringing good motions like this every time and having policy on the run, or are we going to have it embedded into our policy here at the council? Because it's a massive frustration, this issue, and I can see why the mayor's brought this forward to us, and I can see his frustration. But every time development around our city causing these type of issues, we're going to be bringing motions every time because it's going to be damn more frustrating.
Right, let me answer that by saying, I hope not, but my faith in other people's ability to make this work is eroded. And I don't understand why staff can't make these things happen or bring to us a blanket policy that says there's a big development project on, we're going to go and negotiate a traffic management plan with that builder, and this will be part of it, and time parking is anticipated to be part of it. And bring it to council if need be. I'm over having to try and make excuses for things that we can control. And in particular, this developer has a very good basement car park. It's part of the EOI. Remember when we sold the land, you've got to build a basement car park. They've got it. The slab's in. They're using it for storing components for the building. They've got a ground level that they can store things on easily. So in my view, this problem is unique in that it's resolvable fairly easily. But they have declined twice now to provide the ramp and allow cars into the basement. They can fix this problem. If we have another development somewhere else where they can't access the basement, like the townhouses in Allen Street, which was just really, that was just a mess down there. They don't have the opportunity. That was a very tight site, and that we need a different solution for that. But this one, I think, is fairly straightforward.
But even we have basic development problems in parking. We have development problems all the time with contractors and parking. I mean, this is a grander scale. I get it. We have minor development issues in terms of parking on the streets right across the city, I would argue.
Well, we've asked for 4 years for a traffic management and parking study to be brought to us. It hasn't come. We've asked for a precinct study on this precinct here, and we're still waiting. We've asked for surveys to be done in this precinct before. We've been told we don't have a problem. I'm sorry, my patience with being told we don't have a problem is over. We need to do something rather than nothing. This may not be the best answer, or something similar may not be the best answer, but doing nothing is the wrong answer, in my view. So I'm happy to take suggestions. The 200 metres to me seems an answer to it. But I think this should be temporary, and if this allows us to trial resident permits in a way where we can see if they work or don't work, I don't think it sets a precedent. It's just giving it a go. It's very short term. Matt and then Christine.
There was a question asked by the group around staff. I don't know whether we.
Oh, yes, yeah. So that has been thought about.
So this wording doesn't make the staff exempt from time parking. So do we need to add that in there, or is that dealt with somewhere else?
Sorry, in terms of it being thought about, not resolved, it has been raised, I think, as a concern. So, CEO, your input on that would be good.
Yes, so through you, Mayor Lachlan, as it stands right now, this would capture staff. I'd have some pretty upset staff. We've already had some brief conversations around as a leadership team how we might manage that, in particular for staff with physical or other challenges. I think we'll have to provide some form of permit for them and manage that, and we would do that. Obviously, I have an overriding health and safety obligation to my staff. The challenge, obviously, from an operations standpoint of a motion like this, I think it's been flagged that it will push builders' vehicles out. I also can foresee a situation potentially where you see the builders coming out 1 hour and 50 minutes and playing musical cars, as I used to when I worked in the city long ago. So that's a risk, but you know, again, all these are challenges. I take on board the Mayor's point. It's a difficult situation. There's no easy answer. Staff will not be happy with this. If members were minded to include a permit system for staff, then that would add another 40 or 50 cars into the equation as well, which were there before. But again, that's a matter for the chamber. You know, I'd love to ring the bell for staff because there will be some upset people, and certainly we can manage the issues by exception. But otherwise, it has to be a matter for the chamber. And with that, I think I'll leave it to you.
I mean, I'm remiss of not including staff in the motion. That they are a legitimate user of the facility, as are the residents of Byron and Olive Street. So I think we can add that into part 2, that council arranged for temporary permits to be provided to council staff, and to Olive and Vine Street residents. The councillors, I'm just saying, this is not pretty, but doing nothing, I guarantee you, will make the problem worse, because the building's about to ramp up into full fit-out phase. There'll be more contractors' vehicles out there, and still no basement being used. That's what worries me.
Can I say a second question, if that's okay? Are we? You see in a lot of, say, car parks, funnily enough, that the car parks are for people utilising a certain facility, shopping centre, whatever it might be. Do we have the power to put signs up and say that this car parking is for, instead of excluding, including, while you can park there, and then by default excluding contractors from parking there?
See that?
So through you, Mayor Lachlan, I will ask the Mayor, the Director of Infrastructure to cover that off. But before he does, my suspicion is the answer to that will be no, on account of the fact that this is a road reserve. Is that correct, Director of Infrastructure?
Through the Mayor, just to ensure I understood the question clearly. So you're saying to allow staff parking but not other vehicles?
No, I was just interested in whether we could put signage up which legally allowed us to
determine the user of free parking.
With the private
Yeah.
parking area
Sorry.
signs, through as you drive into private car parks, so it's useful.
Sorry, through the Mayor, no, we wouldn't be able to do that because it is actually a public road. It was actually a privately held car park that housed to.
our car park. What about our car park?
Underneath.
Underneath the building, we have additional powers to limit access and use.
We're already happy to that.
I agree with the Mayor about this is not pretty, and you know, there's a great saying which is perfection is the enemy of good, and I think that's what we're faced with at the moment. If we wait until we have a precinct plan and a global plan for parking, then we'll never get there. We have to start doing some things, even if it's not ideal, and I think it will kickstart a little bit more bigger and give us some precedents to analyse as part of our processes that we're hopefully going to put some more time into soon. So I think staff should be looked after for sure, and I think 200 metres is a good suggestion, and I think we should give this a crack and make sure that the safety officers are out there licking their pens, ready to write up a ticket the minute someone ticks over, and that's all those things together are going to make some difference.
I need to extend, sorry, members, if you wish to raise some more questions, so just seek leave to extend the suspension of meeting procedures for another 10 minutes to 10 past 10. All those in favour? Sorry, just say that again. All those in favour? All those against? It just gets up 10 to 10 past. Christina?
I'd like to deal with the issue of the, if we can insert the 200 metres from along Old Street and Vine Street from Prospect Road. I think that's the correct thing, and take out 2 Broad Road.
Yeah, all of it, radius within the development site. So maybe get rid of the warrant. That would be my suggestion. Get rid of Olive and Vine Street and just say within a 200 metre radius. They say we're doing this on the fly. My preference would be support number 4, and the first 3 points come back to us as a special meeting with a map that we can show residents what's happening.
But we have to have the 2-hour time for the traffic people to do the blitz.
That's right. No point doing a blitz without it. Can I suggest to you, members, that in order to pick up those comments, that the words are changed in the motion to be in the 4th line, the whole of the rear car park and on streets within 200 metres of the building site, delete Olive Street.
200 metre radius.
200 metre radius of the building site.
Would that include Prospect Road or just residential roads?
Yeah, so we'll include
Streets, by implication, I mean Prospect Road. Prospect Road's got a 1 hour limit on it. Yeah, the amendment hasn't gone anywhere yet, but I'll go back to that in formal proceedings. It's getting a bit messy, and I think there's a comment about it being Monday to Friday, which makes sense probably, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday.
I think it'll work on Saturday morning.
Not so sure the school demand is a problem Saturday mornings, or this building demand is such a problem Saturday mornings.
Okay, yeah.
So I think it probably would work out okay.
So through instances there, you have to exclude Prospect Road, otherwise it's will override those parking controls.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, residential.
Okay, so on, yep.
It still doesn't make sense. So we've got 200 metres of radius
Let's
of
park
the building.
Yeah, so just get rid of.
You need to take out all of the.
And-
Yeah,
and-
take out Olive and
Sorry,
Vine.
Minister Secretary, after the word building site, in 2 words.
Take those out.
If you can put in there excluding Prospect Road. And then delete Olive Street and Vine Street to Braun Road. Following that. Yep.
And above.
And above. All of the need to go out above as well.
And in part, yes, there too. And in
Yes.
yeah, okay. And in part 2, temporary permits be provided to council staff and residents within the 200 metre radius.
Could that be number limited to up to 20 permits or something? Because I just think we would be
Specifically 1
lynched.
per household, it says.
The council staff,
The staff.
we would be lynched if they got all permits. And
I'm not sure we can, I don't know how we would do that even with more time to consider it. How would you say some staff get it and some staff don't?
Well, on need,
Is there a question about how many staff park here now?
yeah,
Because I presume a lot of our staff don't park here. They might park here.
yeah, for Olive Street, exactly.
And they do. But
We
you're
know.
asking the CEO to go and have a raffle about who gets a parking permit and who doesn't.
But it just might bring people in. Just say, oh, park here now. I've got a permit. You might find people who might not normally park, start parking. I don't know. It's a wicked problem. I agree.
Correct.
It has to be everyone.
Correct.
Just unintended consequence might be more
Well,
people parking.
Perhaps I
So
suggest to you that we can't resolve that now, and I don't think a survey of staff would necessarily
no.
resolve that.
Right. And number 1, can we take out Olive Street and Vine Street and put in, and the resultant flow on impact to surrounding streets or something
Well,
like
it
that?
actually reads now, result flow and impact to the community.
to the
To the
community.
community.
Yeah,
All right.
that's
Part 2 says council and residents within that radius, specifically 1 per household. And then the net line below that, Jazz, to provide for on-street parking and take out in Olive Street and Vine Street. and replace that with within the 200 metre radius.
Just raise one thing, sorry.
Yes.
I'm just doing a measurement, it does take in about half the move stream as well. That's, just want to make sure that's.
Yes.
If you've got a better answer,
I
Director,
just-
I'm very happy to receive your better answer.
I was just doing 200 metre
I get it.
circle.
So will this override any 15 minutes in loading zones we've already got those
Yeah.
things? So this, I don't like doing this on the fly. I'd rather have a special
And
meeting.
in Olive Street by the, there's a loading zone there as well. And there's also a PO, a post
that's
office.
that's on prospect moving.
Yeah.
So you get, this is.
So a new part 4, Jazz? That the above changes
Where?
are not to affect
Yeah.
parking limits
Yeah, existing.
that are existing and under 2 hours. So that's disability parking, loading
Yeah,
zones, 15-minute zones.
That's better.
That's
Better,
the
better, David.
One overrides the other.
Just trying to capture it.
Yeah.
Can I get a permit next Tuesday? Because we've got to come here at 3 o'clock.
Just a question, is there a reason why it's to the end of May?
Yeah, they're saying they'll be finished in April,
Oh,
and I never believe a builder. Because they're always optimistic. That's the only reason. Members, we're back in formal proceedings. It's up to us, you, whether you support this or not. I would imagine if this is unworkable, the CEO will bring us something different pretty quickly in December if this gets up and there's some issue with it. Say again, sorry.
Can we get the crossed out lines moved out so we can actually read information clearly, if that's possible?
They've deleted altogether.
But yeah, it's where it's got the crossed out.
Yeah.
So it reads properly.
Councillor Barnett, just a technicality, you started to move an amendment. I didn't go to a seconder. I didn't ask the mover and seconder if they're happy to move it forward.
Oh, I didn't think we got a second.
No, you didn't. So you're happy to withdraw that proposed amendment?
So that becomes the motion that you're moving and then somebody will second, is that right?
Yeah, I need to process what you had before. I can come back to, would you be happy to move this as an amendment?
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there I'll ask the mover and seconder if they're happy to incorporate. I am. Is that a yes? I saw yes. Seek leave of the meeting to incorporate the changes as part of the motion. All those in favour? That's now incorporated and becomes the motion. No need for an amendment. Any further debate? Councillor
I'd like
Baker.
to move the amendment.
Amendment?
That council staff permits are limited to 20 or as needed for accessibility and safety reasons. Accessibility and safety. I don't know. Putting it out there, goes in the minutes if it's done. Stairs, yeah.
Sorry, as amender, can you just confirm what you want in your amendment? And I can
Okay,
move and
the
second.
council staff permits.
The number of?
No, I'm going to be careful. It doesn't say council staff permits. Permits are limited to 20. I'll just say limited to 20. And let the CEO can.
Yeah, and just clarify that. So council staff parking permits.
Parking permits, yeah, that's it.
I'll ask the mover and seconder if they're happy to incorporate. Mover? No.
That's all.
It's
It's up there. It's
Yeah,
fine.
I'd be happy to-
Yeah, I mean, you can tell my sentiment though. I just think when residents are kind of.
Sorry, councillor, you can still move it as an amendment if you want. It just won't get incorporated.
So if I move it,
Yep.
will it be minuted?
If you get a seconder and it gets
Okay.
up,
I'll second it.
All right.
happy to second it? You should speak any further to it, councillor?
No.
Christine has already spoken, so she can't second it.
Can I just check, is the amendment, is amend moving the rest of the motion, but just adding that in as well? Is that how, what it is, or is it just adding something to?
No, the move is not, it's now a formal amendment which has been moved by councillor De Backer. Having spoken to the previous motion.
That line be added,
Councillor Barnett can't second it. Is there someone else who wishes to
I
second it?
thought I withdrew my amendment, so it wasn't.
We accepted it.
You've spoken to the motion.
No,
It wasn't accepted.
It wasn't accepted.
It wasn't
Sorry, councillors, it doesn't matter whether you move an amendment or not, you've spoken to the motion, so therefore you can't speak to the motion again, and seconding the amendment is deemed to be speaking to the motion again. It's as simple as that, it's not about the previous amendment. Is there anybody else who wishes to second this amendment? If not, it lapses, go back to the motions of this part 1-4. Any further debate?
Can they be taken apart?
Yep, happy to take in parts. Councillor Pearce.
It's just point 4. When we had the parking, I was under understanding we didn't let it lapse, it was continuing. Is that why we had 2 people employed, I think that.
Yeah, we're using the.
Sorry, I'll take the question. I was informed that we employed extra people to do it, and then they were contracted. They were gone. So they're in, did it, gone. But I'm CEO. Can you clarify?
So through you, Mayor Lachlan, my understanding is Parking Goods continues. Contractors are still engaged, but we are down a staff member right now for other reasons. And as a consequence, that has impacted our ability to continue the blitz at the same level. Is that correct?
Okay.
Correct structure.
Through the mayor, yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, my misunderstanding.
50% bids.
That's it. Yeah. Any further questions, Councillor?
No, I just was understanding,
Yeah.
because that was a revenue, well, it was twofold. One, it was achieving a lot, making people more diligent. And secondly, we were making money out of it. Showing we're making money, even employing the 2 consultants, contractors. Anyway.
Any further debate? And Councillor Backer, you have spoken to the motion.
Just a question.
Good question.
Is it best to be explicit of the address? So if this becomes a kind of precedent, that the building site at 136 Prospect Road or wherever it is?
Good point.
Prudent.
In part 1
Yes.
of the apartment complex at street number
Whatever that is.
132?
134.
Bloom
132.
Bloom is 132.
132 Prospect Road.
We're 128, we end at 128.
Thank you for that clarification. Any further debate? Councillor Wynne?
I'm just concerned about community feedback around, because this is our building, it affects staff and it's on our grounds and it affects us. And there's other sites or other places in the community and we're reacting to this one immediately, or we're doing something about this one. I'm just concerned that there could be things that can come back at us. So I'm not so comfortable with this. That's just my comment and gut feeling.
Yep, thank you. Any further debate? Okay, and I sum up then by saying thank you for all those comments. I think that's improved it. I'm not at all happy about this. I'd be much happier that staff listen to us very carefully when we say we do not want impacts from construction activity to be unreasonable. We want agreements to be made with large projects that traffic and parking are dealt with upfront and agreed, that we want staff to be far more diligent in how they enforce these matters. We don't have that at the moment. I don't know why not. We don't. We've had a lot of complaints. I've had several complaints about parking in this precinct, in particular at the back of this building, for people who want to come here, who are old, infirm, don't have a disability ticket, are finding it quite difficult to find a park at the back. Every time I go out the back, it's packed full of tradesmen's vehicles. We need to do something about it. In this instance, we can, because they have a basement. I wouldn't promise that they could on every site. This is an issue which will occur in other places. The situation here is unusual in that this is a community facility. And I think we've got to protect the use of the facility. We also built that car park with 90 car parks in it to take account of our staff, and they at the moment are also disenfranchised, I think, unfairly. So it's an imperfect answer to a problem which I think will be ongoing elsewhere. I encourage you to support it, to try this out. This will go for 5 months. I think it's worth a try for that period of time to see what happens. If it doesn't work, we can change it going forward if the staff advises that's what we need to do. But as I say, if we don't do anything, it will get worse. There will be more tradesmen on site every week from now up until April, and that means more vehicles. And if we do nothing, I think that'll be the detriment of the neighbourhood, not just our staff and the users of this building. So I urge you to support it to give this a go. Now that concludes debate. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Sorry. Yes.
So I'm assuming that all the people involved will be sent a letter.
My apologies. I did say I'd take it in parts.
Yeah.
Somebody wishes to take it in parts again. I'm happy to do it again if that's the case. No, my apologies. That was my mistake.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Dunning.
I just think so. A flow-on will be that all the people that are involved will be sent a letter, I assume.
I'm happy to leave that to the CEO to deal with the correspondence and communication and the like. There will need to be a lot. Questions with notice there are nil. Confidential items, probationary review plan for CEO and key deliverables. There's an order to exclude the public there. Somebody happy to move that in its current form? Councillor at the back, if you wish to speak to it.
No, thank you.
The seconder, Deputy Mayor, wish to speak to it. Any further debate? All those in favour? Yes, is carried unanimously. Thank you.
Turn off the
Turn off the.